Hello and welcome to Hindsighting, where we discuss all the movies to win the Best Picture Oscar and try to figure out if this picture truly is the best or is time rendered a different verdict. I'm Edward Clow. My guest today was a semifinalist in the Nickel Fellowship for his script Ghosts of Kiev. He made the 2015 Blacklist with his script Castle Drive. He sold his pitch for Special about the woman who created the Special Olympics. Currently, he's a prosecutor in Baltimore City and hosts the YouTube channel Fade In. Matthew Scott Weiner, welcome back to Hindsighting.
Oh, thank you, Ed. It's lovely to be here.
This episode is part of our mini-series 1981ers, where we usually examine a single movie from 1981, but today is a very special instance where we're looking at two versions of one 1981er, Superman 2 and Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. Why 1981? Well, Matt, you're in a position like David Sipkin and Billy Corbin to actually know the place I'm about to mention. Video Pursuit was the video store that we went to. It's been gone 30 years, I think last month, which is crazy to think about. I know. Tell me about it. But when I started going to Video Pursuit, when I was about 8 years old, so just a little older than my son is now, I would look at the VHS boxes and the posters, which were all beautifully hand painted back then. We used to make things in this country. I would look, oh, this movie looks cool. And I'd flip it over and I'd read what the movie was about, and it always listed what year the movie was. And it seemed to me that every movie came out in 1981. I know that's not, of course, literally true, but it just seemed like so many movies came out in 1981. It seemed like every franchise, including the one we're talking about today, had an installment in 1981. As I got to know my directors, it seemed like every big director had a movie out in 81, or most of them. So it just seemed like, you know, I have a certain nostalgia for this year, even though I didn't see, with one exception, any of the movies that we're covering in the theater. I didn't see Superman 2 in the theater, I hasten to add. But a big part of this show that we've talked about is, do we need more than 5 Best Picture nominees? And at the end of last season with 2009, we went up to 10. We're currently at up to 10. And I think 1981 is a year that we could nominate 10 movies without stretching. There are other ones. There are even other ones in the 80s. I forget how old you were. Do you remember kind of like looking at the boxes, like just exploring like it is a library.
I do. This was like, I'd say a couple years before the Blockbuster opened up on what was it, Biscayne?
It was
the one that I worked at.
Yes, yeah. That actually,
next to Little Caesars.
Yeah, that was Miami Gardens Drive. You know what? I got this. What's it called?
Was Video Pursuit Biscayne?
Video Pursuit was just off Biscayne, and like near Ogis Elementary, which is probably still there. It was literally like around the corner from Ogis Elementary, maybe middle school too. I think it's So yeah.
So I mean, I remember walking around Blockbuster more vividly than Video Pursuit, only because I was always taken aback by an entire wall dedicated to one release, because they would come out weekly.
Sure.
And I would look through, before I started going alphabetically through the store and just like randomly picking a letter and just movie I'd never heard of and, rent that. If there was a wall of movies and there were clamshells behind all of the boxes, I didn't bother with it, because I was like, oh, no one cares about this movie, so I'm not going to care about this movie. But if it was empty, I'm like, well, now I got to see the movie.
Right.
And that's how I ended up seeing the Evil Dead movies in reverse, because Army of Darkness came out in the video store and was selling out. So I'm like, I got to see that. And I'm like, well, this is a sequel. And then I saw Evil Dead 2, and then I saw Evil Dead. But going through Video Pursuit, even at our size and age, it felt crowded in a good way. Like, it felt cramped. It felt like there was more movies than the store could hold.
Yeah.
And that excited me, because I'm like, this place is literally busting at the seams with things I've never even seen or heard of before. And like, I couldn't digest them fast enough. So that's sort of my visceral memory of Video Pursuit. Rest in peace.
Yeah, Video Pursuit was in a strip mall, and it was a storefront. It was a very small room. Blockbuster, like all Blockbusters in the whole country, were big. They were big and they were spaced out, and it was retail. It was a retail space, like going to the Gap or something. Yeah, I was just curious because you're one of. I mean, Billy and Dave have both done 1981ers, so I've been able to sort of talk to them a little bit about.
1984 is more my 1981 than 1981.
That's fine.
When I think of like years that I could easily pick 15 movies out for Best Picture, it'd be 1984, 1985.
And that's fair. And I think I said on the Platoon episode that I could do 1984ers, 1986ers,
Yeah.
1989ers. The 81 thing is nostalgia for the reason that I open with every episode. It's just because I was a kid and had that thought, that's why we're doing 1981ers. I could very easily do not 83, not 80, but almost any other year in the 80s. I could do a ton. We can talk about a ton of movies, but obviously the season is about the 80s in general. But yeah, so I want to move on to Superman 2, but first, a word from our first sponsor, Matt. We now have a
Oh, really?
sponsor. Yeah. Yeah, we have our first sponsor. So today our show is sponsored by Marlboro Cigarettes. While there's overwhelming evidence that smoking leads to cancer, if you absolutely have to smoke, make it a Marlboro, why don't you? Marlboro, because we all got to die of something. Marlboro Reds now provide extra lung tar for the man or woman on the go. Sorry, they're not really a sponsor. I just saw the giant truck in Superman 2 that had the Marlboro logo on it, and
Uh
I really wanted to take up smoking. I also really wanted a Coke and some KFC.
huh.
So it's all this movie's fault.
Well, once we jump in, it's this movie is extremely timely for a really weird reason,
Yeah.
and I'll get into that as soon as we start. But yeah, I
Well,
want to talk about that.
now let's move on to Superman 2 for real, all kidding aside. But first, a few stats and facts. And one of these stats clears up a mystery that I've had about this movie for almost my whole life. So I'm glad I kind of dug in a little bit. And I'll get to that in just about a minute. In the 2004 interview, Margot Kidder claimed that Richard Donner shot enough scenes to make his own cut of the film, and that unused footage was, quote, somewhere in a vault. A website started a petition for Warner Brothers to allow and sponsor for Donner's cut of his movie. The footage was re-edited into Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, which is one of the movies we're going to talk about today. So I didn't know that it kind of started off Margot Kidder, and we're obviously going to talk a lot about Margot Kidder today. Gene Hackman did not return to do reshoots for the second film. All his scenes were originally filmed by Richard Donner. Other scenes shot by the new director that required Lex Luthor used a look-alike and a voice impersonator to add any lines needed. I know you have some thoughts about that. We'll get to that soon. Richard Lester, the director of Superman 2, had to reshoot a large volume of film to gain a sole director credit rather than just shoot the remainder of the Richard Donner version scenes to, quote, fill in the gaps. This is why there's a portion of duplicate alternate versions of certain sequences and scenes in one director's version not appearing in the script of the other version, rather than two alternate edits of one combined source shot material. This is why the Donner and Lester cuts are radically different and also kind of similar. We're going to get into that because I think what's crazy is not how different these movies are, but how similar in some ways. On August 1st, 1981, a television spot for the film was the first commercial ever aired on MTV. To pay off the bit I did a second ago, anti-smoking campaigners opposed the film as the largest sponsor was the cigarette brand Marlboro, who paid $43,000 for the brand to be shown 22 times in the film. Lois Lane was shown as a chain smoker in the film, although she never smoked in the comic book version. A prop included a truck sign written with the Marlboro logo, although actual vehicles for tobacco distribution are unmarked for security reasons. This led to a congressional investigation. Director Richard Lester was not sympathetic to the epic look that Richard Donner had given to the original Superman, saying he didn't want to do the, quote, David Lean thing. Harkening back to the techniques of the early sound era, Lester's films had always been shot with three cameras filming the action simultaneously, two cameras for close-ups, one for the long shot. Lester's technique added to the friction on the set caused by Donner's firing. Margot Kidder particularly disliked him, and this is why, if anyone's ever seen Superman 3, Lois Lane's in about 5 seconds of it and gets a giant hook and doesn't show up again until the very end. This was the most expensive movie ever made at the time of its release, which I did not know. Richard Donner had completed about half of the movie before they replaced it with Richard Lester. Both Lester and the Salkinds reached out to Donner at the end of filming and offered to give him co-directing credit on part 2, but Donner refused. That meant that Lester had to go back and reshoot 20% of the movie, since industry union rules dictate that a director must have directed 80% of the movie to get his name listed in the credits, which he did wind up doing. This is the mystery that got uncovered for me. Warner Brothers released this movie in the winter of 1980 before it came out in the States in 81. So if you look it up on Letterboxd, IMDb, it always says 1980. But if you look up the American release date, it's June of 81. And this has always confused me. This and Casablanca, which we'll litigate at a later episode. I know because Casablanca comes out in 42 but wins the 43 Oscars. And, but this is even more confusing. So technically, this movie came out in 1980 in Europe, and that's weird because they've never done that since. You would never release a big sequel of anything in overseas before you do it here in America. Don't know why that was done. I know we're going to talk about this. When Superman saves the boy in Niagara Falls, a woman in the crowd of onlookers can be heard saying, "What a nice man. Of course he's Jewish." Superman's quote, parents, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, were the children of Jewish immigrants, and many fans and scholars have long argued that they created the character in 1938 as a Jewish American response to the Nazi idealization of Nietzsche's The Superman. Superman, like thousands of Jewish refugees who were fleeing Europe at that time, was an alien from a war-torn place. Also his origin story bears no small resemblance to that of Moses, and his original name, Kal-El, contains El, a Hebrew name for God in Judaism. This is the second sequel in history to gross over 100 million domestically after Empire Strikes Back the year before. For her role of Ursa, Sarah Douglas's voice was partially dubbed by actress Annie Ross, who would go on to play Vera Webster in Superman 3. In most of the Richard Lester directed scenes, while her normal voice is prevalent in the restored Richard Donner footage in the Donner cut. This grossed $14 million domestically in its opening weekend, which was then the biggest opening weekend gross in history, breaking the record set by the first Star Trek movie in 1979. It grossed $108 million, making it the second highest grosser of 1981 behind Raiders of the Lost Ark. Richard Donner had been approached about a possible director's cut of this film as early as 2001. However, complex legal issues involving the cut footage as well as reluctance on the part of Donner prevented any official restoration from taking place. All this changed with the production of Superman Returns in 2006, which led to Warner Brothers resolving all outstanding legal disputes regarding footage from the first two Superman films. By that time, the public demand led to Warner Brothers to commission the Donner cut, which was edited by Michael Thau. After repeated urging by Thau, Donner eventually agreed to approve of scenes as Thau progressed in editing. Over time, Donner allowed himself to participate in the project, the more interest he took in restoring the original concept for the film, even going so far as to bring in screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz to the fold to ensure story cohesion. The result is the closest film possible to Donner Mankiewicz's original version of the film. So I want to give a brief background, and Matt, you can please correct me if I'm wrong. For people who don't understand why there are two versions of this movie. So when they were shooting Superman 1, they were also shooting Superman 2. I don't know if this was the first time this was being done, but we did a whole episode of Lord of the Rings where they shot all three movies at once. I think this might have been the first time where they attempted this, but
Well, well, Richard Lester did Three Musketeers
with the Salkinds.
and right, and that was originally supposed to be one movie, and they split it into two because they just wanted to make more money, and so that's why they thought Lester would be a good fit for this. From what I understand, is he'd already done it with the Four Musketeers? Was that the second? It was like Three Musketeers, Four Musketeers.
Well, Lester's shadowing. I mean, not in a good way. He's sort of like in reserve all through the production of Superman 1, and sort of like hung over Richard Donner that like if he fucks up, if he gets fired, then Richard Lester's going to take over. So he's on the set. I mean, Donner directs the first movie. But what happened is Warner Brothers distributes Superman, but they don't put the money up for it. The Salkinds raise the money themselves. They're the ones who pay Brando $3 million and Hackman $2 million. And they end up running out of money, and they just decide to just focus on one. And we're going to get into the ending and all that other stuff pretty soon. So Donner shot most of 2, but they just had to stop working. And Tom Mankiewicz, who ostensibly rewrote Superman 1 and 2, kind of joked that if Superman 1 had bombed, they would have made Richard Donner come back and finish 2, but because it was a hit, they punished him by firing him. There's a lot of unkind words about the Salkinds, and it was not a great experience for Richard Donner. But just to give people some background as to like why this happened, because in any other circumstance, they would have finished the second movie, and the second movie probably would have come out the next year. It would have been.
Well, like, you touched on something that I've always thought was super interesting about, the behind the scenes workings of Hollywood and how Lester had to reshoot enough to get sole credit. Which leads to, and people don't realize this when they watch the two versions of the movie, you and I watched them relatively close together, so we have a better reference for it. Takes are different, performances are different. It's the same dialogue, but it's performed different. It has a different emotional impact, especially Margot Kidder, who was phoning it in for Richard Lester. And
I want to push back on that later on. I want to push back on that later on, but go ahead.
Oh, well, I know you really like the Paris sequence, which I hate, but we'll get into that. But like, it reminds me, the closest thing that reminds me of is when they shot the Bela Lugosi Dracula, because they shot the Spanish version of Dracula on the same set at the same time,
Mhm.
and it was the Midnight Crew.
Right.
And so they would use the sets during the day with Bela Lugosi, and then at night the Spanish crew would come in with a different Dracula. I don't know the guy's name who played Dracula, and they would shoot the same things again. And you can watch both versions of the movie, and they're the same movie, but with very different styles
Yeah.
of the same material. It's the only other time I could think of where you have one movie shot essentially twice. You
Yeah,
know?
but I think Dracula, they did that concurrently and they did that intentionally. With
Yeah.
Superman, this guy went back and had to reshot things just to claim ownership of them. Just I mean legally in terms of like the DGA rules. I mean, I don't understand, and there's no way to understand. I don't know why Donner didn't just accept co-directing credit. I mean, maybe it was a fuck you to them, maybe to make them do this. That he would certainly be forgiven for having any anger toward them, but that would have been, had Donner agreed to co-directing a co-directing credit, we probably wouldn't have the Donner cut. We might have a more, I don't know. It's a real, I won't say it's sliding doors, but it's a real interesting what if. Yeah, I got, let's just talk about how the two movies open, I guess. Let's just start there.
Well,
So,
even before we
okay.
talk about how the movies open, one of the big things that your listeners should be aware of is um, how big an impact John Williams' score had on the film as a whole, especially in the beginning of the movie,
Hmm.
because they couldn't use John Williams' score in the Richard Lester version, so they got what I forgot his name now.
Ken Thorne. Well, I don't know. I don't have any research on that. I think because John Williams didn't come back. I think what it is 'cause there's really good documentary about John Williams. He doesn't talk about Superman 2 specifically, but he does talk about sequels. And he says that like I always try and do, he says I scored 9 Star Wars movies. You know, I scored Jaws 2, I scored 2 or 3 Harry Potters, whatever it was. I think what happened is because John Williams didn't come back, they were allowed to use the theme, just like in Jaws 3 and 4, you hear the Jaws theme. And in Superman 3 and 4, you still hear the Superman theme.
Yeah, but he didn't. But he wasn't the composer,
He was
right? So he
not.
wasn't the conductor.
No.
And so when they like, he ended up doing the music for the Donner cut, and it's a lot more like thick. The sound is thicker. It's not as tinny and cartoon.
But I
There's
don't know if
just
there's any.
I don't know. There's a huge difference
There is, but
in
I don't know if any. I'm glad you're bringing this up. So let's just start with John Williams because he's the first thing you hear in the, I guess, 3 Superman movies, 1 and 2 versions of 2. I don't know, having just watched 2 days ago. I'm sorry, the Donner cut. I think they used I think they used John Williams music from the first movie. I didn't hear any cues in the Donner cut of 2 that I didn't hear in the first movie. So I don't think there's an
that's it.
original.
That's interesting. I don't know. I
I
don't know
don't
if that's
I'm almost
true.
positive that he did not compose an original score and that they took, and it's effective, it's fine, but there's no, John Williams, to my knowledge, never wrote a score for 2.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, he didn't come back for 2. I don't know if it was out of, he might have just been busy. God knows he was busy. So it might
Or
not,
expensive.
well, expensive, well, both. And the Salkinds were very, very cheap. And if you look at Superman 3, movie I have some begrudging nostalgic affection for,
Me too.
yeah, but, and they're not involved in 4, so 4 is not their fault. But I think the music we're hearing in the Donner cut is the score from the first movie, just repurposed. I
And
agree.
and even still though,
It's better. It's
there's
way better.
you can hear the difference though. Like the theme for Superman is less cinematic in the Richard Lester version.
Mm.
And it's unfortunate because that's how the movie's introduced. I mean, yeah, so we could talk about the beginning of the movie. In the Lester version, there's like a 25-minute recap of the first film,
It's
right?
so, yeah. So let's start there. I have okay. We're starting out agreeing. Yeah, I want to say one thing. That when I was a kid, and I think the fact that 1 and 2, forget the version of 2 that we're talking about, the fact that 1 and 2 were shot together, when I was a kid and I watched these movies on TV, it took me a long time to figure out what happened in 1 and what happened in 2. And part of the confusion, I had a similar thing with the first 2 or 3 Rocky movies, is that the opening of this movie we're seeing the opening credits, but they're cutting to like these really long, like lip flappy, like there's a lot of just like people talking, which is like a bad music video. They're recapping the first movie Um, it and that's not even the beginning. The beginning is a cold open that they had to
Mhm.
redo. So another thing we have to explain, I feel like I keep saying that, the Salkinds nickel and dimed Brando. The reason that Brando's not in the Richard Lester cut, and that I think that hurts the movie so much. And I also never understood that, all I knew about Superman was that like Marlon Brando got $3 million for 11 days work, and he's really good in the first Superman, but he kind of disappears. If you look at his role in the Donner cut, I'm like, okay, that's $3
Mhm.
million really well spent. They did not, they got into a legal dispute with Brando and were not allowed to use any of his footage in the Richard Lester cut, which I think hurts the movie, but it's actually not Richard Lester's fault. And that's why the mother is there, which doesn't really make any sense. No disrespect to Susanna York. So that's a piece of this also is that Richard Lester could not use Brando and the legal disputes that I talked about because Brando is in Superman Returns.
Yeah.
And I think when they untangled that, because the Richard Donner cut comes out like 5, 6 months after Superman Returns. So whatever you think of Superman Returns, we don't have the Richard Donner cut without it. That's just fact.
Yeah, yeah, and the the existence of Marlon Brando in the Donner cut, to me, so completely changes the intensity of Christopher Reeves's performance that, like, instead of just being like, and we'll, I'm fast forwarding it ahead, but it's like, hey, I want to be mortal so I can, like take Lois to my silver floating bed. That's the same in both versions, but in the Lester version, it's like a 2 minute scene with the mom. She's like, well, if you want to be human, you got to be human. If you don't, you don't. And with Marlon Brando, there's like really like a lot of gravitas and really like a lot of soul searching for Christopher Reeve. And I think it's honestly the best acting that he did in the entire series is in that cut Donner scene where he's pleading with his father to let him just be happy. He just
Mm,
wants to be happy.
yeah,
And Marlon Brando's like, well, you're too special to be happy.
right.
Like you should get your happiness from helping humanity. And he's like, but that's not fair. And it's just a very human thing for this alien,
Yeah,
creature to exhibit. And I just love that entire sequence.
I agree. I think the inclusion of Brando, first of all, it makes the $3 million make much more sense. I think, I mean, this is a little broad, but tell me when you think of this. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue with this first part of my statement. Superman, the first Superman, is the first superhero movie. It's the first one that's, I mean, Batman 89 obviously kind of like is maybe the first modern superhero movie. I think that, but the 78 Superman is the first time they did it with high production values. I mean, there was serials, there was a 66 Batman movie, which is just a couple episodes of the show strung together. I mean, not literally. Um, I so you would agree with that, right? That the first superhero movie is the 78 one, right?
Yeah, there's a comic book comparison to Watchmen, which um comic books used to always get kind of like, oh, it's not art, it's not meant for adults, it's meant for kids, it's
Sure.
child fare. Even though the amount of artistry that even went into the original Superman comics when they were being drawn, I mean, you have to every single panel is a painting, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Beautiful.
and the stories that were being told were adult stories, but no one was taking them seriously.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Watchmen comes out, and it was like, whoa, this thing should win a Pulitzer. Like everyone started taking it seriously as like a medium to tell stories for an adult audience in a comic book form. Superman was the first superhero movie that felt like it was made for adults,
Mhm.
and they were rewarded for that.
Yeah, and I think just piggybacking on that, I think that Superman 2, we'll obviously talk about which version we like better, is likewise the blueprint more so than Batman Returns, although I think Batman Returns, it's more like it's also the blueprint for the sequel to a movie like this. There's two villains, the stakes are higher, the emotional stakes are higher. They get to it a lot more quickly. There's no origin stuff. I mean, a lot of that's obvious. So looking at both versions of this, I'm like, oh, okay, this is, and maybe it's not as innovative, but like the opening of both cuts of Superman 2 gets right to it because all the origin stuff is established. We know who this guy is. And it's funny because the sequels, some of them have, you know, some of them, have like sort of redone. None of them have redone the origins, but like it's interesting, like how sequels. Like we had to see Spider-Man's origin again, which was like pointless in my opinion. And
Well, you're talking about reboots though. And if you want to talk about like Spider-Man 2, X-Men 2, Blade 2,
right, they get right to it.
okay? So like in Superman 2, we get a montage of Superman 1. We had to in order to explain Zod's treasonous, which I guess in the Richard Lester version, he just breaks a red crystal, and that's like the thing that like puts him in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
But like in the Donner version, there's the whole trial, and you don't know what he did, but it seems way more serious than breaking the crystal.
Right.
But then you have the huge montage because how else do you catch the audience up? Here's how it evolved, right? Is in Spider-Man 2, you have painted scenes, like painted stills of Spider-Man 1 over the opening credits.
Yeah.
And the same thing is kind of done with Blade 2, where you see like over the opening credits, you see parts of Blade that catch us up to where the story's at. And in X-Men 2, they go straight into the story with Nightcrawler breaking into the White House, which is a much better White House break-in scene than what we get in Superman 2. But so that's sort of like the evolution of how you get into a sequel.
Sure.
And I think Blade 2, Spider-Man 2, and X2 are far superior to the original films, to the first films of those series, those
right.
that IP. Superman 2 is not. Obviously, Superman the movie is the better movie, no matter which version you're watching.
I agree. Yeah, I just think that like this template about, yeah, I mean, again, the part of the reason why the opening of the original, of the Lester cut, which I'm going to just call it from now on, they don't have Brando, so they have to recreate the Zod thing, and they have like that stormtroopers like alert, 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 and it's just like, yes, I mean, I think that the reason that the opening of the Lester cut is so choppy, it might just be where film editing was at that time. It might just be they can't. I mean, I almost would have, like Star Wars is such an elegant solution to that. Empire Strikes Back, it just has the crawl, and it's just like Luke Skywalker is missing and Darth Vader's. What I don't have it memorized, but like, I just think there was a more dynamic way to recap the first movie.
Like you said, there was no precedent for it, and so the Lester version kind of did what I think that they felt they had to do, which is like last time on Superman.
Yeah, well, it's like a serial. Look, it's a serial. Superman's all these things are a serial. I think there was a more dynamic way to do it. I've talked about this all the time. Like, my issues. There's like one scene in Psycho and North by Northwest that I don't like, but it's like me imposing a modern sensibility on a movie that's old. That might be what I'm doing here. Because even the things that you mentioned that did it better are 20 years later, 25 years later. So, a lot happens in cinematic history in 20 years. So yeah, I mean, we can move off that, but I think it's
well, let's see. In 1981, I mean, that's Raiders of the Lost Ark, so we don't have any like I'm trying to think of other big franchise sequels that came out before Superman.
Well, Empire
2.
Strikes Back is the biggest one.
I guess that would be the biggest one, and
the biggest movie of the year, and they had the crawl, which they established in the first movie, and Star Wars is inspired by serials also. I just think that George Lucas and Irvin Kershner would have come up with a more dynamic way if they wanted to show clips from the first movie.
Well, they solved the problem. They solved the problem by solving it in the first film. Like how confusing is it for an audience to be shown, episode 4? I don't think the theatrical cut to Star Wars had episode 4.
It did not.
Just was Star Wars.
It was just Star Wars.
But they introduced a crawl at the beginning of the first film, so it made sense in the second film to continue that trend.
Right.
Superman didn't have that kind of opening. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely them figuring out the grammar, and there's a lot of things I'm gonna get on Richard Lester's ass about. This is relatively minor. I just felt like so. I'm gonna get to something that I guess we disagree on. So sticking with the original cut. This is kind of a small thing. Maybe you don't have a problem with this part of it. I really love, so I'm talking about the original cut and the Lester cut. When Clark walks into the Daily Planet and he's just oblivious. Everyone's like running around and like no one's talking. He's like, "Hey, how you doing?" It's like, I can't talk to you now, Clark. And I just thought that was a great, I don't know. I just like that energy because it's like, okay, something's going on already. Like, something's going on, but Clark doesn't know what's going on. And, I thought that was a great. Interestingly, both cuts start in the Daily Planet, and I think
they
that's kind
do,
of
but in very, very different ways.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about this movie, about these movies is it's there, like we talked about, there's some scenes that are identical, but they use different takes or they're dubbed differently or they're not dubbed at all. But in the case really with Margot Kidder, because she looks so different in the
Yeah.
first movie and in the second movie. I mean, I'm not making a joke. She had a lot of mental health and substance issues, and I'm going to speak very highly of Margot Kidder later on in
Yeah,
the
no,
show.
when we get to the test screening footage scene, we'll talk about it. But that for a scene that I think is extraordinarily well shot and acted for a test screening
Yeah,
or for a test footage, it was before Christopher Reeve even put on any muscle. He like weighed like nothing at the time.
yeah,
And he's wearing this horrible wig. But when you look at Margot Kidder, you look at that test screen and you're like, oh shit, that's fucking Lois Lane. She's
yes,
beautiful. She's like perky.
yeah.
She's like, it's like you
She's
want to be
tough.
around her.
Yeah.
And then you look at her at Niagara Falls in the Lester version, and she's gaunt and clearly going through things. And it's like it made me more sad than nostalgic because I'm like, man, she like I understand why they cast her, and the chemistry between them in that test footage is so amazing
Yeah.
that if things had gone a little, a different way for Margot Kidder, like the chemistry they would have had in those two films together would have. It's a really unfortunate
Yeah,
reality.
and I think, yeah, I mean, this isn't a hot take. Reeve's my favorite Superman, you wouldn't disagree with that. She's my
Mm.
favorite Lois Lane. Hackman's my favorite Lex. I say that as somebody who liked all three of them in the most recent movie. I thought all three I think the new Superman, the new Lois, new Lex were all terrific. They're not these people, but they're the only ones who've come within spitting distance. As much as we talk about Christopher Reeve being the best Superman and the ultimate Superman, I think Margot Kidder is equally. There's a certain thing that you just have to have, and it's not just being pretty and having dark hair. There's like a certain.
I don't know what it is about and maybe it's because we grew up with these Superman movies, but Margot Kidder is Lois Lane. I can't
Yes.
even think of it. Like when we did our Amadeus episode, and you're like, Ben Kingsley almost played Salieri. I'm like, holy shit, I want to see that deep faked, right?
Yeah.
I can't think of any modern actress that I want to see playing Lois Lane. I just don't.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, we're definitely gonna talk a lot about Margot Kidder, because she's obviously. I mean, I'd say her. I mean, yeah, I mean her role in one and two is so central. So let's get to the thing I know we disagree on. So you don't like the Paris scene?
I don't like the I don't like the Paris scene. Well, and here's a couple reasons. I'll lay them out, and then you can tell me I'm wrong.
No, it's okay.
Superman the movie ends with Lois kind of looking at Clark, being like, right? And like she kind of puts it together at the end of Superman the movie, but she's like, no, that's crazy. Superman 2, the Donner cut, opens with that through line immediately picked up on, and she's like, I'm gonna draw a hat on him. Like I think that, and I'm gonna throw myself out the window. Like it immediately picks up on that thread to show that like Lois is like, she's a reporter and she's digging in and she's got this hunch and she's gonna not only is it a hunch, but she's going to throw herself out the window because she's that sure of it.
Mm.
And that's how the movie starts, with that kind of energy. And it's like such a great, like, Chris Reeve, Clark Kent scene. Everything is working. Perry White's working. Jimmy Olsen is working. Everyone's working together. And it's just so nice to see it all kind of together. And instead, in the Lester version, and this is something that the new movies there was like no Clark Kent in the new movie at all, like barely at all, like where he's like, and one of the things I like about the Lester version, I don't hate everything about the Lester version, is when he crunches his thumb in the orange juice thing, because you have to realize that like Clark has to, or Kal-El has to constantly find ways to make himself a putz. So no one knows he's Superman.
Right.
And so it's like he's choosing to do these ridiculously silly things so that no one can suspect that he's Superman. And you get that more in the Lester version, but you completely don't have any of that in the modern Superman movies. But the Lester version of the movie doesn't even put Lois in the same room as Clark in the beginning. And so certain things just don't add up. You've got the terrorists holding the tourists in the Eiffel Tower. And I guess they've been there a really long time because Lois has enough time to fly there on a Concorde. And then when Superman finally flies out there to save her, this is a guy who turned the Earth around backwards, but he can't get there like a little bit quicker. It takes him like 10 minutes to fucking get there. And so it's just like the logic of the movie in the world that was already built doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And you separated Lois from Clark, and I really just wanted to see them interacting together from Jump Street, right? So, and that's not even taking into account just how silly it is that there's one guy that she has to sneak behind and just like all you know, I don't know. I
Well,
don't
here's
know.
one thing I want to. Okay, so I didn't say I like the Paris scene better than the scene from 2 that you just described, because the scene that you just described, I think, is terrific, and I think it's a much better scene than her throwing herself into Niagara Falls, which I don't hate, but I think it's a much better scene of her throwing herself out the window, and it's a much more fun way. I like the Paris scene unto itself, and I like it because I think it does do this is where it gets a little tricky, because I think what I wanna do is I think I prefer the Richard Donner cut, but I do think that there are 3 or 4 things from the Lester cut I'd like to graft onto it. I think
Yeah, me
there's a
too.
there's okay, good. So we're coming at a similar place. So our friend Dave Sipkin did this thing, um, where the movie Legend, the Ridley Scott movie, and boy, is that coming up a lot on this podcast. But
That's so odd. Yeah.
but it just keeps coming up. But there was a director's cut of Legend that's
Oh,
much
with the
better
score, with the original
with
score.
the original score, but our friend Dave Sipkin took the Tangerine Dream score from the theatrical cut and he
Yeah.
put it onto the director's cut. And I think there's bigger moves than we need to make with Superman 2, but I think it's that idea of like, okay, you've something from A and something from B, and there needs to be a combination. So we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that. So I completely agree that the opening of the Donner cut is a great, great scene. And because he shot it and she looks the same as she does in the first one, it feels like it was shot like a like with in the same. I mean, it was shot all at the same time, like Lord of the Rings, like Back to the Future 2 and 3. It just feels cohesive. It's the same engine behind it. Um, I like the Paris scene unto itself. Here's why. And here's something that I think is interesting about the Richard Lester cut, which might have been what the thinking was, but including Paris. You have the Eiffel Tower, you have Niagara Falls, you've got the White House. You have these like images from our world, this iconography that are being
Right.
disrupted, whether by the heroes or by the villains.
You got Mount Rushmore.
Mount
Yeah.
Rushmore is another one, even though in the Donner cut, I like that they knocked the
Me
Washington
too.
Monument way better. But Mount Rushmore is another one. But you know what I mean? I feel like the inclusion of it, because you know what it, because obviously, this came out first, but I saw it after. The James Bond movie View to a Kill has an admittedly much better sequence on the Eiffel Tower, but it also has a climax where it's a fight on the Golden Gate Bridge. I just think there's like this cool thing about like engaging world monuments into the
Hmm.
story. And I don't know if there's a way to keep the Paris scene. Maybe it goes someplace else in the movie. I agree that opening with the Donner cut scene with Lois, oh, I think he's Superman, because it's like, days after the missile, after he saves the world. The crazy thing about this exercise is that you have to ignore the fact that the last movie ends with him turning time back to revive Lois, because the version we both prefer of that, because he does the same thing at the end of the Donner cut. That's the bind they put themselves in. Like when they
It is,
decided,
but it's kind of like We're going back to Star Wars. Star Wars did the same thing with Return of the Jedi. They weren't supposed to, from what I understand, they weren't supposed to blow up the Death Star at the end of Star Wars, but it was a much better ending than what they had, and so they're like, "Fuck it, we'll just do that." And then
worry about it
when they
later.
got to Jedi, they're like, "I guess we'll just have to do it again."
Yeah, that's
But
interesting. Well, let's get there when we get there, because that's a whole
well, no,
thing.
but
Sorry.
what I'm saying is that the Paris scene is necessary in the Lester version because in the original long version of the two movies put together, the end of the first movie was supposed to be him getting rid of the nuclear missile, and the nuclear missile he throws into space, it explodes, and that's what releases them from the Phantom Zone.
Right.
But since he'd already done that in the first movie, they needed a new device
Sure.
to get them out of the Phantom Zone. So that's why he has to throw the hydrogen. So they had to come up with a way to get a bomb into space, and so I think it's not the worst way to go about. They had a big action sequence. They put
No,
Lois in jeopardy,
it's
which
a
is
really
like
good solve. Yeah, it's a really good
yeah,
solve.
like it's
Yeah.
like very serialized in the comics. She's always in danger, and so he's got to save Lois. It's very much in character.
Yeah.
it's just the way that it was done felt very two-dimensional and silly compared to what, in
Okay.
retrospect, what you see in the Donner version.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess if I had my way, and this is too granular for us to even go into, I would love to put that Paris scene maybe someplace else in Act One and not have the it could blow up, but then obviously it wouldn't set free the three villains. I mean,
Right.
there's not space for both. I just want to go on record as saying I really like the Paris scene unto itself. Here's a scene I like, and it's in both movies, and I actually think it's pretty much the same. I really love when the villains land on the moon, and
So you where Billy Baldwin is the astronaut looks like he either looks like Billy Baldwin or Donnie Wahlberg, whoever that actor is with like the frosted tips. He's definitely not working for NASA. But here's what I wanted to say about like how timely this movie is. You know what ship they're on?
Artemis.
Artemis 2.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's Artemis 2, the one
Oh,
that just got home. Like it's Artemis 2 and Superman 2.
interesting.
Yeah, I didn't realize you picked up on that. Yeah, that's amazing, isn't
I
it?
picked
Like
up,
that's
yeah.
like
Well, they keep saying Artemis, Artemis. Yeah. So, I mean, this scene is, I mean, it's pretty similar in both versions. I mean, the music's different. I think. Well, here's one thing I did notice that's different. And you were talking about the music. So, in the Donner cut, when the guy you're just talking about, the frosted tips, when he sees Ursa, the cue is different, and it's way more ominous when you see her in the Donner cut. It's like
it's
kind of
I don't know
scary.
what the cue is on the Superman the movie score, but it's that like it's
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
Kryptonian
It's from the beginning of the first
so
movie.
much moodier, so much
You
better.
know what it is? It's from the opening of the first movie, which is about those 3 getting incarcerated,
Yeah,
getting sentenced.
I think John Williams made a Zod theme, and that's pretty much what it is. It's just this like
Yeah,
really
yeah, it's "Boodling." Yeah,
yeah.
Zod definitely has his own theme, and obviously Williams, I mean, Christ, best
The,
there
the
is.
the the three of them are way scarier in the Donner version than they are in the Lester version. But the one thing I do miss,
Mm.
they are like Nam is like he's just like this
N
force
Isn't
of
it Non?
nature. Non or Nam? Is it Nam
Non.
with an M
I think
or
it's
Non with an
Non. I think it's Non.
NON?
I don't know how it's spelled, but I think it starts with an N and ends with an N. I think it's Non, like garlic naan. I mean, I don't think it's spelled the same way, but
All right, so Non in the Lester version is kind of like a giant baby,
mm.
right? Like, and in the Donner cut, he's just more menacing, and he's just this big hulking brute. But the one thing that I miss about the Lester version is him figuring out how to use his heat vision. It's a very silly thing on Earth where
Oh,
he's
with
like
the stick?
with the stick, and then it's like so by the time he blows up the army truck, it's like, and he looks at Zod like, I did it, right? Like in the Lester version, that's a payoff. But in the Donner version, he never struggles with his heat vision. And so he's just this giant, menacing force that is the enforcer for Zod, which is scarier, but it's a moment that I miss from the Lester films.
Okay, so let's get to this. I think that let's just focus on Terrence Stamp, that this is one of the best villain performances. Like, I think this is Heath Ledger level for me. This is what I knew Terrence Stamp from. I think he's terrifying in this. I think there's some humor, and I think that this is another thing where it's like the second movie, like where you get to like Lex Luthor's a great villain in the first one, but he's not scary. Like he's this billionaire
Mm-hmm.
who throws stuff. It's like Zod is fucking scary, and we'll get to Ursa and Nan in a second. The 3 of them are definitely scary. I just think that Terrence Stamp is not really talked about in that you hear Heath Ledger's obviously, like the one everyone talks about the most, and that's deserved. But like, I feel like you hear other names that I just don't think are as strong. I just think Terrence Stamp is like god tier villain
Well,
in
I don't
this.
think you're giving the zeitgeist enough credit because Neil before Zod is like the first fucking meme, right? I mean, it's
Is it
like
really?
like Neil before. So the scariest thing about Zod in the movie to me is when he's on TV and right before they cut, when he's in the Oval Office,
Yeah.
for no reason whatsoever, he just goes Zod.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. But like he's like, bring this on a Jarrell to me, like I think the reason he's so effective is because now modern bad guys have to be fucking jacked and young, and so you even look at like who played Zod in Man of Steel? What's his name?
Michael Shannon.
Yeah, and he's this big, massive villain that you have to deal with. Christopher Reeve is a physical specimen. Terrence Stamp is not.
Yeah.
And yet, the way that he conducts himself and the way that he presents himself is so much scarier than any random jacked up Marvel villain.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right,
And I
but
think it's
I don't think that he's not given credit.
okay. Well, I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to be disproven on that. I mean, I think the only other comparison that I can make, he's not a superhero villain. The greatest villain of all time, not a hot take, is Alan Rickman. And I think that's, you have like a serious English actor who rarely ever did anything mainstream. I mean, he's in a movie called The Collector. You remember that movie from the 60s
Yeah, I
where
do. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is a dude who is like part of that wave of like Michael Caine, Albert Finney, like he lived in the same apartment as Michael Caine and John Barry and like hung out with like Sean Connery in the singing and swinging 60s. Like Terrence Stamp is like a serious fucking dude. And him being in this in a weird way is kind of like Brando being in this. I mean, not that they're the same actor, but it's just like what gave the first Superman movie legitimacy is that like Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman were in it. That didn't
Yeah, look,
happen
say
before
what you
that.
want about the Salkinds, but look at the talent that they got
No,
for these films. It's incredible.
no, they are not. Look, I think my issue with the Saw Kinds is probably administrative because I think they cast an unknown as Superman and they cast two really recognizable actors as one the villain and one the father figure. That's very very smart. And I
Oh
and
yeah,
they
but think about the trust that they had to have in Christopher Reeve,
yeah
not to get overshadowed by Gene Hackman and Marlon Brando. And
yeah
the fact that Christopher Reeve not only held his own, but when you think about Superman, you think about Christopher Reeve. You don't think as much about Gene Hackman. I mean, you do when you start talking about it, but it's
right.
Christopher Reeve. I mean, he's Superman.
Yeah, I mean, with the first Superman, he doesn't show up for an hour, like as Christopher Reeve, like but that's obviously not
I
an
think
issue
it's his
here.
voice, though, right? Is it
It's
dubbed?
his,
He
it's
dubs
his,
the young
yeah, it's his
Clark.
voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he dubbed Jeff East, who plays him as a high school kid. But yeah, so I think I love. I have some questions for you about sort of Superman lore, what I'm going to get to in a second. But I love, and this is another good sequel thing, the escalation of okay, now there's not only a villain who has his powers, but there's three, and they set this up right from the first movie. So in both these cuts, it's really well set up because I didn't remember until I got older that these three were set up in part one. And that's just me
Mm-hmm.
not knowing which was what movie. I mean, I swear to God, I was like 15 years old before I like rented from Video Pursuit the first movie, just so and that's just me, just like being like, again, I had the same problem with Rocky 1 and 2, and maybe even Rocky 3. Because again, they're like, they weren't shot at the same time, but it's like they had those long ass recaps, and it's like last week on Rocky, so it was a similar thing of just not knowing what was where. But it makes more sense with these two movies, and I didn't have the Donner cut until we were in our late 20s when it came out. But I also want to talk about just sticking with the villains thing. I mean, we talked about Non, and he's like kind of comic relief, I think, in both versions, but he's still like a big dude. I think that I really like Ursa, and I don't know that she's such an evolved character, but it's interesting because in the Richard Lester cut, she's dubbed, which I didn't know, by Annie Ross, who I mentioned in my research part of this, is she was a very famous singer. She's in the movie Shortcuts. She plays Vera in
Yeah, she's
Superman
the one who
3.
turns into the robot lady at the
Scariest
end.
thing in the world,
Yeah.
the thing that traumatized me and anybody my
All of
age.
us.
All of us. It's so Baba, and watching it now, I'm not scared, but I didn't understand why I was scared. But she's doing kind of an English accent in her voice, and it's a really good performance. But I just think she's got a great look. I mean, she's obviously very attractive, but like she's got like, I don't know, she's just a great find. I don't know what the decision was. I don't know why Richard Lester dubbed her, because in the Donner cut, you hear her voice and it's not like she sounds like Tweety Bird.
She
Like
doesn't sound that much different, honestly.
I hear a difference, but only because I do
Well,
hear
that's
it.
what I mean is I don't understand the dubbing because it's not like with when they dubbed Schwarzenegger in his first American film because his English was so awful.
This is an
I
English
think it was
actress.
Hercules Comes to America or whatever his first American film was. They dubbed him because he couldn't speak English.
Mm.
Ursa's fine. I don't understand what the dub was for.
You really see the difference in these two cuts, not just in performance, but just like the voices being used. Like the dude in prison where Luther's like, I want my Liberace back. And like I want my Liberace back to I want my Liberace record back tonight. And in one cut, the guy goes tonight, and then the other cut,
Yeah.
it's like there's a scratch on it or something, and it's like, okay,
The
well,
Donner cut is he goes tonight, which is
yeah,
hilarious. It's a
yeah.
great reading.
But
Yeah.
like, there's just so much. Lester just dubs so much. Here's the thing he doesn't dub that makes me fucking crazy and really confuse me. Um, so in the Lester cut, I mentioned they shot this thing in England where they get to like that small town and the little boy's like, please put my daddy down. Please, Mr. General. It's clearly an English kid, and that's fine. Why not dub the English kid who has like 3 or 4 lines? That always confused me as a kid. I'm like, why is this kid British? He's British because they're in England. They dubbed like the second or third villain in every line she says, but nobody thought
Yeah.
to dub. It's just like, it's just so bizarre. That scene's obviously not in the Donner cut. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah,
I mean, Ursa in the Donner cut to me is so much more terrifying than in the Lester version because she's just and so tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. When Brando does the recap of all 3 villains for
what they did.
Clark in the Donner cut, we have like these like 3 shots of them.
Yeah.
Is that in the Lester version? I don't remember.
No, I
No.
think that's something they did with CGI, and I have a lot of opinions about some of the things they did for the Donner cut. I think that's something that they couldn't do or didn't do, but no, because in the Donner cut, it's the mother and
You mean the Lester cut?
sorry, in the Lester cut, it's the mother talking, but it's very quick, and then it just cuts to Gene
Yeah,
Hackman like 3
but
of
she
them,
doesn't
you know?
give a rundown on the bad
No.
guys. Like she doesn't give a profile on the bad
No,
guys.
no, no.
And
That's
it's that
only
one scene where it's like, and he's like, and Ursa, who only knows, whose only mission in life is to cause pain, or whatever he says about her.
yeah.
It's just like kind of a snippet of her character, but it's like terrifying. It's like all she knows is pain and suffering, and it's like, oh shit.
He
And
says
so
this.
everything she does,
Yeah.
she collects badges. She collects the
Yeah.
NASA badge. She collects the sheriff badge.
Yeah.
It's almost like in Universal Soldier with Dolph Lundgren collecting ears on the necklace. Like it's like she's collecting trophies of people she's literally fucking like killing, and that's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, and he in the beginning of the first movie, which they recap at the beginning of the Donner cut, he does say something like, I forget how he phrases it, but he paints a really, I mean, I think Nan's probably scariest in the beginning of the first movie because he doesn't say anything and there's no
Yeah.
buffoonery in it. But yeah,
And he's wearing like 9-inch heels too.
yeah,
Make him huge.
yeah. I mean, the scene. I mean, yeah, I think she's a really good. I think she's a really good villain, and I think she's kind of like a henchwoman, and I think that's something. And I think she brings kind of like a, I don't know. It's like, I hate to be so reductive and say it's nice having another attractive woman in the movie, but I think there's Superman, as it should be, is very sort of chaste and not sexualized. And I feel like she brings, you don't see it if you don't want to see it, but there's like a little bit of I don't know, like a swagger she brings to it that
Oh no, it's there. And
yeah.
she even says, at one point in the movie, she's like, what world is this where the men wear jewelry? Where she rips off the medals off the army
Yeah.
guys in the White House. And so she's very much like a strong female villain, but also, gender
Right.
centric. And she's like, I'm not afraid to be like a sexy.
Yeah.
Like I always think like whenever Trinity in the beginning of the Matrix, Trinity flies off the roof and through the window. She flies like Ursa to me, but I think the two of them
they look a lot
so
alike.
similar.
Yeah.
But in such a like, you're like, oh, like yeah, she's the bad guy, but man, she's sexy as fuck, and I want to see her kick some ass. Like I like watching her on screen. I think the three of them have such good chemistry as henchmen, and Terrence Stamp is their leader, that I don't feel bogged down by the number of villains like I do in some of these other movies.
No, it's perfectly
they're
counterbalanced.
A package, but like it's clear that Terrence Stamp is the bad guy.
Right.
But they're a package, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a great point because when I saw Wonder Woman 1984, it was really interesting because I was like, wow, there are a lot of villains in this. And Billy Corbin had said this really interesting thing. He said, like, it's Batman Returns, not just because there's a lot of villains. Like, it's like Wonder Woman 1984 is like almost a remake because Pedro Pascal is like the Christopher Walken character. Like, he went on and on about it, and it was like, and Batman Returns is not, I mean, it does have a sort of a cult. I know some people who love Batman Returns, but
it's a mess.
Well,
I mean, I love it, but it's a mess.
Right, but it's not the sequel. I mean, look, they fired Tim Burton off the franchise because of it, even though it made money. So it's not the blueprint you want. I mean, you would look more to Superman 2 or obviously Dark Knight before you look to Batman Returns as far as like, okay, what's a second installment? But yeah, she does look like, or rather, Carrie Ann Moss does look like her. I mean, the leather's just a little more tightly fitted. And if you were to, if you were gonna bring Ursa back like in the 2000s, then you cast Carrie Ann Moss and she'd be
Yeah,
fucking fantastic.
it's lightning in a bottle.
Well, what it is Pierce Brosnan said this great thing when he was still playing James Bond. He says, like, being Bond is hard because there's nothing to hide behind. And I've always said that being Superman is maybe even harder. If you put me in the Batman cowl, the movie still makes $800 million in its
Right.
opening weekend. That's not to take away from the guys who play Batman. Batman is so much about the costume, not Bruce Wayne. That's a different thing. Batman is 95% the costume. You put a cool costume, you shoot it well. It really doesn't matter who
Yeah, I
plays
mean,
this
it's same with
part.
Spider-Man. You got to have someone be a good Peter Parker, but once he puts the mask on, it really doesn't matter.
At Iron Man 2, same thing. I mean, once he's Iron Man, but Tony Stark is harder. I think Superman is tougher because you have to be convincing. Thing about Superman, and maybe Thor is the only other thing I can think of that falls in this case. It's like if you don't look like an idiot, you're doing a brilliant job. If you don't look stupid as Superman, if you're not embarrassing yourself, that is so much of it. And you have to be Clark Kent.
So here's the thing that everybody gets wrong about Superman in the modern versions. Christopher Reeve was playing a part in two different ways. He's clearly playing a buffoon as Clark Kent, but when he's Superman, he's also playing a character as Superman when he's like rescuing cats or playing with kids or whatever, right?
Right.
But then there's moments where the true Kal-El comes out and he's just got this super intense look on his face where he's like dialed in and very intense. And you see this in the Donner opening where he runs outside and he uses his heat vision to open the awning so that she falls into it or whatever, right?
Right.
Like he's being a buffoon and then he runs outside and he's just got this super intense, focused look on his face that doesn't exist in either versions of Superman or Clark Kent. It's like Kal-El. He's playing three characters, and you really see that play out in the Marlon Brando scene where he's like, "I want to be human," because he's not playing either. He's playing Kal-El, and so Christopher Reeve played three parts for one part. I like David Corning Sweat. How do you pronounce this? What is it?
I think it's Corn Sweat.
Corn Sweat. Well,
I liked him too, by the way.
I liked him, and he's got great dimples, and he looks great as Superman. I didn't get enough of him as Clark Kent, but he's playing one character. He's not playing three. And Christopher Reeve, like, they really got so lucky finding him because if he wasn't able to play those three different parts at the same time, I don't think we have modern superhero franchises. Maybe for the better, for the worse. I don't know.
Yeah, two things. I mean, what I said about Terrence Stamp also applies to Christopher Reeve, Juilliard trained actor. I mean, they just found. I think he'd done maybe one movie before the first movie. I'm not even sure it was a big part. I might even. Have
I think David Ball-Sweat's also Juilliard, isn't he?
I don't know. I don't know anything about him. But other than that, he's actually Jewish, which is a nice change.
Of course, he's Jewish.
No, but the actor is Jewish, is what I'm saying. So I think that's our first one. But yes, we can. But I think it's a brilliant point about how the fact that he's playing three different parts.
The Justice League then between him and Gal Gadot.
Yeah. I think it's a great point about how he's playing three parts. I think the one thing that neither cut really gives me is I would have loved more time of, I guess I'll call him Kal-El with Lois, like after she finds out who he is. I mean, I understand you want to get to him giving up his powers because both these movies run at about 2 hours and I don't think they need to be any longer. But I wish I would have seen, I mean, in a weird way, it's like, I guess that scene in the diner is kind of like him wrestling with that. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna, I can't be, it's like, because he's not around anybody else who knows who he is. He doesn't have to be Clark, but he's not Superman either. I feel like that's kind of
that scene bothers me in both movies because it happens. It's the very first thing that they do together as a couple. And he's like, oh, he's like, Job, right? I've made a huge mistake. Like, it's like the very first like meal that they have together. He's like, I wish I was Superman. And she's like, shit, I wish you were Superman too. He's like, fuck, I got blood on my Harrington jacket, which is a nice jacket, by the way. And he gets beaten up by a middle-aged trucker, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense, but it's also the first interaction they have after he gives up his powers. And I think the reason why it doesn't work for me, and I hate to say this, both versions of this movie, as much as I love Gene Hackman and Ed Beatty and Miss Tessmacher, I'm sorry I keep forgetting her name.
Valerie Perrine.
Their lived in chemistry together, the three of them, their comedic timing when he does the bunny rabbits on his silhouette and Gene Hackman goes, huh,
Yeah.
right? And like him and Miss Tessmacher, like he's constantly like putting her down and she's like, oh, ho, 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 and he's like, oh. They just have this lived in relationship, which is really great. But Lex serves no purpose in Superman 2 whatsoever, but he takes up a lot of screen time. And so if you were to take Gene Hackman completely out of the movie and just have it be about Zod, nothing changes. He still ends up at the Fortress of Solitude. He still ends up shifting the powers over. Lex really doesn't need to be there. He doesn't need to show up randomly at the White House. But then you have all of this extra minutes, the screen time that you could have given to, you know, Kal-El and Lois post giving up their powers instead of just one scene and then he's hitchhiking back to the Fortress of Solitude. The whole thing felt very rushed and messy in both versions.
That's really interesting because I'm trying to think of
I mean, Ms. Tessmacher disappears after the Fortress of Solitude.
She gets
She's
the
not
hook
in the rest of the movie.
and Otis doesn't get out of jail. I'm trying to think, like, I guess I'm trying to think because Luthor knows where the Fortress of Solitude is, but there's probably another way for.
But you know how they get to the Fortress of Solitude? They follow Superman.
No, they don't follow him. Lex tells them where he lives, and they don't know where it is because that's how Lex doesn't get killed. Says, I have Superman's address.
But he flies away from New York to get them away from New York, and he goes to the Fortress of Solitude.
But they don't follow him. They think he's run away. I mean, that would be the fix. I mean, now we're kind of rewriting the movie. That's interesting. I think we agree. I don't know if I agree about Lex Luthor, but I definitely agree that I wanted a little more time with them. I don't have the problem with the diner scene that you do, but I do think it is quick. It is like I gave up my powers and then it's like I'm regretting it. And given how it's interesting, I never thought I'd say this, given how like every movie now, especially superhero movies, average at 2 hours and 48 minutes. I could have had 15 minutes minimum of just them, and maybe just them traveling through and then just like, what is he like? Because it's an opportunity that I think both movies blow of like, what would this guy really be like? To the point that you made brilliantly about like he's playing 3 parts. He's Kal-El there.
Yeah.
Around her, he doesn't have to pretend to be Clark Kent. He doesn't have to pretend to be Superman. I mean, forget about.
Well, now, plot wise though, you can't because while he's
because Zod is taking over.
Zod is taking over the world in real time. So how much time can pass? It's an unfortunate reality of the plot.
Yeah, I think the problem with the Donner cut, and I understand, is that I find it very choppy. And I think that they cut things out just because Richard Lester shot them. And my big ding on the Richard Lester thing, I know I'm preaching to the choir, is that and there's this huge dichotomy, there's a schizophrenic quality to the Richard Lester cut that I want to get to with the thing I like about it best. But the thing I like about it least is the comedy is really absurd. It's like yucks. It's like really stupid comedy as far as what he brought to it that Donner didn't. Like, the most egregious examples, I'm jumping to the end, like when Ursa and Zod are creating kind of like a hurricane in Metropolis, which is in both movies. It's like the guy in the phone booth, and he's like, hello,
and on the roller skates.
The roller skate guy's still there, but they cut around him. But there's like 2 or 3 things in the Lester cut that are just. But another thing is when they get to that small town, there's a lot of yuck humor there, and I think they're cutting around that. But I think they cut the Donner cut too close to the bone. For instance, it's really choppy. They land, and then they cut to the newscasters like this town has been destroyed. Well, we didn't see that, and I understand. And I don't need the whole sequence with the British kid. It doesn't need to be there, but you could at least have her kick the two rednecks asses, which I think is fine, and I think is a good scene for her. Like, let's hold hands. Like, that's a good Ursa scene. Maybe Lester shot that and Donner didn't, and that's why they cut it. But I think this is why I think that's a small thing. But I just think like
I agree, and
it's too choppy.
There's a so Zod is this really formidable villain, but it always bumped me that he's like Planet Houston and it's like he doesn't know it's planet Earth, but then he like he does this exposition dump where he's like, the closer we get to a yellow sun, then the more powerful than our. So he like knows the chemistry of Kryptonian blood in a yellow sun,
Right, but doesn't know what Earth
but he doesn't
is.
know it's planet Earth.
Well, because Jor-El knows what Earth is because he sends Kal-El there.
Yeah,
It's not
but
an
it doesn't seem like
accident.
Earth is a secret, you know?
That's interesting. I think that's just an inconsistent. Yeah, I think that's just poorly written. You're right. Because if Marlon Brando knows what Earth is,
Yeah, it
Zod.
just seemed like a joke that was a fun joke to have, but it kind of takes away some of the gravitas of
But
Zod.
that's in both cuts,
Um,
though. That's in the Donner
I
one
know
too.
that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. That
yeah.
like people get on the Richard Lester version for being slapsticky, but if you watch the just the Otis and Lex and Miss Tessmacher scene in the Donner cut, I mean that is like some of the greatest Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty's comedic timing in that sequence is just like fantastic. It's like comic gold, but it's slapstick. It's all slapstick.
Well, again, I mean, like Christopher Reeve, like Terrence Stamp, like obviously Marlon fucking Brando, Gene Hackman had
Which
already
is how I
won.
believe he liked to be. I think that's how he liked to be referred to.
Yeah, Marlon fucking Brando. Um, obviously Hackman was already one of the best actors. We've talked a bit about Hackman on this show. We haven't yet covered one of his two Best Picture winners, but he's come up on the show a lot because he died last year. Ned Beatty's another one. He was in Deliverance. He was in Network. He's like a really serious actor. I only knew him from Otis and then some things in the '80s and like kind of these buffoonish roles, but it's another like let's get a really really great actor. Valerie Perrine was in Lenny. You know,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
it's
Like
like
the talent in Superman the movie and Superman 2, like they just knocked it out of the park. Ned
yeah,
Beatty is just so amazing in the movie.
and that could have been such
And
an annoying part in
by the way, what the fuck was Hackman doing with his accent in Superman 2? He's like half British sometimes. Like in his pronunciation of things, he has these weird pronunciations where he's like half British. I had no idea what he was
well,
doing.
the thing he does that I love, and I guess we have to go back to the Hackman question, does he have to be in this movie? But there's this thing that's in both cuts that I love where he meets Zod and he's like, "Oh my fullness, like oh my magnificent one." I just love well, let's stick with that. I mean, what if let's talk about Lex's narrative function because we love Lex, he's a great villain. What if we cut him out? What the function he serves is that he's the one who tells. Well, actually, I guess you don't need that because he tells Zod about Superman, but the president tells Zod about Superman. So I guess you don't
And then
need that.
Superman shows up anyway. So the narrative purpose for Lex Luthor is he has an alpha machine that helps him find the Fortress of Solitude.
Right.
The narrative purpose is he puts the crystal in, and we get all of the background that we need from Marlon Brando in an exposition-y way that like feels like it's like natural into the film.
Mhm.
But that's the only purpose he's because then he disappears. He disappears and then he shows up somehow at the White House.
Yeah.
And then he's just at the Daily Planet and he's like, "Don't kill me." And in the Lester version, it's just like a bad Richard Nixon impression by the guy who's dubbing his voice, like, "Oh, Lex Luthor."
I could have dubbed Gene Hackman and it wouldn't. It's not like I could do an amazing one, but it's way better than that one.
Well, so that takes us real quick as an aside to what we were talking about, offline about this movie and what AI and 11 Labs and generative AI could do these days. Like, I just cloned my voice in 11 Labs so that I could try to do podcasts without actually spending the time to do them, right? The technology is there. Michael Caine is on 11 Labs. John Wayne is on 11 Labs. You have who else is on there? Matthew McConaughey is going to be on there. You've like Laurence Olivier is on there, and it's a perfect clone of their voice. If the Donner cut were to be made today, we wouldn't have that weird wide shot of Clark at the window when Lois falls out.
Terrible.
It would be generative AI. It would be a trailer came out today for a movie with a young Val Kilmer. Did you see it?
I did watch it.
And I got to tell you, I can't get past the fact that Val Kilmer has passed away, and I'm never going to see this movie. But it looked pretty good to me.
Is the whole movie AI or just his part in it?
Just his part. I think there's AI in it because
he looks a lot. I have a lot of questions.
He looks young.
He looks young, which is weird because he wouldn't look that young if he were alive and had his voice. Like he was 65 when he died. So it's like he looks like he does in like The Ghost in the Darkness. He looks like he's like 38 years old. So
yeah, but it's convincing though.
It
at least
is, and it
convincing enough to where they could, like, if they were to redo the Donner cut, or if some fan were to make a fan version of it today,
uh
and they 11 Labs Gene Hackman's voice, and they deep faked Christopher Reeve, right? The scene of Lois typing on the typewriter, it's just literally a different actress. It doesn't look anything like Margot Kidder in the Donner cut
yeah.
when they do the, and so like you could change all that. You could have, the scene in the hotel not be test screen footage. You can make Christopher Reeve more muscular, right? Like you could fix all these things now. Would you be against that because it's AI, or would you be okay with it as a tool in the same way that Spielberg used face replacement in Jurassic Park because the stunt woman looked up, and when she's hanging from the getting attacked by the raptors, or when they used facial replacement on the crow for Brendan Lee after he died? It's all none of it's real. So would you be? They use deep fake technology to do young Luke Skywalker in the Mandalorian season 3 or whatever. And so, like, if we could get a better version of the Donner cut now using generative AI, would you be against it? I don't know if I would be. I really don't.
I would not be against it in this specific circumstance because Christopher Reeve is dead. Gene Hackman was 76 years old. I think what I bump on the Donner cut is that it's like early 2000s technology on a 70s movie, and it just doesn't. Some of it, and another thing is they could have generated when he's winding the world back at the end, they use modern shots of people walking down New York, and it just doesn't look right. It's like people in 2006 clothing. It almost looks like stock footage, and it just makes the whole thing feel.
Well, I also never understood why Perry White's holding the toothpaste up so high.
But they
There's
shot that
going
in
on there.
1978
Yeah.
or 77. So I think in this instance, and I thought about this a lot. It's a great question. I think in this instance, I'm okay with it because it's not it's tools. You're providing a tool that you would not have otherwise. Meaning like these actors are old. In one case, the actor was already dead. Um, or just older. I mean, it's just not possible because this is a 25-year-old movie when they're doing it. Um,
Well, and it's not like you just put a prompt into Chat GPT and say fix this. There's still, you have artists in there doing the compositing.
I think
It's
I
not just
think
a plug and
no, no,
done
no,
kind
I
of
know.
thing.
I think in this specific instance, I'm very dubious and afraid of AI, and I don't want to make this about that. But I do think in this case, because so much of it looks so dodgy, and a lot of it is, I'm sure it was the best they could do in 2006, but they could do better now. And I think some fans should do that. I think some fans should combine the two cuts in the ways that maybe we're suggesting and fix all the dodgy A. And look, the voice stuff was in the Richard Lester cut.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to get to, and then I want to get to something else that you said, which I think is really important and is about story. But Tom Mankiewicz told this story, I think, on the commentary of the Donner cut, because he and Richard Donner did commentary on the first and the second, which I highly recommend. Um, and Tom Mankiewicz said this great thing. He said some high profile reviewer when the Richard Lester one came out, someone from the New York, I don't know if it's the New York Times, but it was somebody really high profile. Let's just say it was the New York Times. Apologies if it wasn't that. Said in their review that Richard Lester gets a better performance out of Gene Hackman than Richard Donner did. And Tom Mankiewicz called the critic up and said, I never do this. Richard Lester never met Gene Hackman. Everything that you're seeing of Gene Hackman was what Dick Donner shot years ago. So even in 1980, when Hackman was just 2 years older, maybe it was a similar thing like Brando, where like they didn't want to pay him anymore because he got 2 million
Oh no,
for the
no.
first one.
Hackman was pissed that they got rid of Donner, and he's like, I'm not going to do it if Donner. That was literally just solidarity with
Okay.
Richard Donner.
And Margot Kidder couldn't do that because she had more to shoot, and Christopher
Mhm.
Reeve couldn't do that. So the guy, yeah, I mean, it's not even. It's like Miss Chessmarker. I mean, no, what I just did is better than what they did. If what I just did
Yeah.
is, you could have looped me being like, there ain't no Horace Gold, and like that sounds better than the dude that they got. They got a guy who didn't even sound like Gene Hackman. You could go on Instagram and find a guy who does impressions of Gene Hackman and loop. So when they did a restoration of Spartacus in the early 90s, and
Mhm.
Olivier, there was a line missing and Olivier was dead, and somebody said, oh, Anthony Hopkins does a great Olivier impression. Anthony Hopkins loops Olivier, and so it's in that bathtub scene, And if you listen closely, it does sound like Olivier, but it also sounds like Anthony Hopkins, but it's so much better. Yeah, so I want to get to something that you said, which you mentioned just a second ago, and you mentioned in the beginning, the test screen scene. So here's something I don't have a problem with the fact that they use test screen footage because that I mean, they didn't have anything else. And other than the fact that Reeves' hair changes lengths from his shots or whatever, that they couldn't do anything about that. I agree that AI could have I wouldn't want to see that scene completely generated by AI, but I think they could have done some things to that to smooth that over, make it look more like the movie. But here's something that I think that that scene's way better in the Richard Lester cut. When they're in the hotel and he trips and his hand goes into the fire, and I'll tell you why I think it's better. And this is purely about story. And I think this is one of 2 or 3 scenes that I just think Richard Lester handled better. And it's weird because there's so much broad comedy in the second in the Lester cut that I think kind of drags the movie down, especially when you compare it to the Donner cut. So for people who don't know what we're talking about, so in the test screen scene in the Donner cut, Lois Lane takes out a gun and says, "I'm going to shoot you," and O was a blank, which I think is a really good scene. I think it's clever and I like it, but it's Superman being tricked into revealing it. Whereas in the Lester cut, when he trips and his hand goes in there, he's doing that on purpose, even though he doesn't realize it. And he says that because like Clark is a klutz, but Kal-El doesn't have to put his hands in the fire, and
Right.
and
He wants to get caught.
he wants to get caught. And I think that's so much more powerful. And I think it's
Yeah,
so
you
much
bring up
more.
a good point. You bring up a good point because, like, I love what I love about the test screening footage is that what I'm saying is like, so Christopher Reeve already nailed what he was going to do so well when he thinks he's getting shot, and this helps with the John Williams music behind it. But when he gets shot and he stands up real straight, and all of a sudden he's got that serious expression on his face, it used to bother me because I'm like, how would he not know that it's a blank? But then I'm like, well, he's Superman, so bullets probably feel like blanks. Like, so I was okay with that, like suspension of disbelief. But it did feel like like a repeated beat from the beginning of the movie where she jumps out the window because she'd already tried it,
Yeah.
right? And she says it. She's like, look, my mistake before was I put myself in danger, not you in danger. But that wasn't enough for me. That was just like retrofitting what they were doing to fit the plot. I think you're right. I think the putting your hand in the fire from a character perspective is more interesting because yes, he could have not done it easily, controlled himself to not do it, but he wanted to get caught. He wanted to
And it gives
reveal
him,
himself to Lois.
and
Yeah,
I'll use the term you like to use, it gives him agency. It's the main character in the
absolutely.
movie. He wants her to know. He's tired of hiding. He say because in the Lester cut, she throws herself into Niagara Falls, and that scene's fine. I like that her jumping out the window way better. But a similar thing has happened where she's done the same thing. She's put her life at risk, and I just like that scene a lot better. And there's a great moment where he takes off his glasses, and then you see him kind of become like what you're to your point, becoming that third character that we don't get to see. He's not Superman. He's not Clark Kent. He's his true self.
Yeah,
That's
because
who he.
even in the first film when he does the interview with Lois, he's putting on like the charming Superman persona.
It's
He's not
PR.
Kal-El, he's Superman,
It's
and those are
PR.
two different things.
Right. He's talking to the press because he's trying to present an image of himself. I mean, it's PR. It's exactly what it is in the movie. It's like people have some questions about me. This is what I want them to know. I'm here for, and that's a great scene. But yeah, he's not, it's like a first date. He's on first date behavior.
I'm gonna have to revisit something I said about David Ball Sweat. I'm gonna have to revisit something about what I said about David Corn Sweat in
Sweat.
the new Superman movie, where I said there's not enough Clark Kent in it. You know what there is in it? A lot of Kal-El, because when he gives the interview, when he's hanging out with Lois in the apartment,
Yeah. Great scene.
and then even when the Justice League is fighting that space imp in the background, he's Kal-El. He's not Superman. He's not Clark. He's Kal-El, and that's what I wanted that we don't get in Superman 2 because we go straight to the middle-aged trucker. Like we don't get any of that kind of chemistry between them. We get that in the new Superman movie, and I didn't give James Gunn enough credit for that, so I take that back.
There's like some serious stuff I want to get to, but I want to get to something that this is in both cuts and it's actually not that different. So there's this really doesn't comment on like the two cuts, but it's just something I kind of want to get on record, even though I'll probably cut this out. When they're in Niagara Falls, that is the worst mother in the history of film. Like, this is what I think. Like, so everyone knows we're talking. I can't imagine anyone's gonna listen to this podcast who hasn't seen at least one cut of this movie. It's almost exactly the same in both versions. So this isn't even about Lester versus Donner. The kid is doing something so dangerous, and the mother's like, "Okay, that's great, honey." And then Clark intervenes, and she like, "Don't you embarrass me like that again." And then the kid falls. Superman saves him, and then the mother is like, "Get away from here." So here's a scene that I would want, even though I would never get it. Same thing happens. Superman saves the kid. Everyone's applauding. Superman picks up the mother and throws her off Niagara Falls. That woman, that kid didn't deserve to die, but that woman deserved to have her kid die. That makes sense? That woman deserved to lose her child.
So like if that scene were done today, I can just see her doom scrolling on her phone while he's doing something dangerous.
Absolutely.
Like that's the kind of mother, right? Like that's
Same
how it would
thing.
translate to modern, yeah.
Yeah, yes, she'd be doom scrolling. I just, and this isn't even so much a criticism of the movie, because obviously, in the
she didn't have to be such an asshole though. Like I had why? So why did Mankiewicz decide like this mother needs to be a fucking asshole?
Well, what I know about the Mankiewicz family, I think his own mother, having just heard a whole incredible bit about his father, Joseph Mankiewicz, his mother had some issues. So I'm thinking about this right now, a little bit of Hollywood history. His mother had some serious mental health issues. I don't want to make light of that.
I don't think he tried to throw himself off the rail.
No. But yeah, anyway, so that's less a criticism of like one cut versus the other, because again, I think that scene's virtually identical in both cuts. But yeah, I just think that mother. Oh
yeah, that's one of the scenes that Donner was stuck with though, with like the Lester photography, I think, because like
I'm not so sure. I don't know what.
They redid the whole hotel bit is Richard Lester,
and they cut it way out.
They cut it up way down. I mean, they still have the bellhop being like, "Oh, you want to carry her across the threshold?"
But they cut the whole bit inside,
yeah.
which I don't miss. Yeah, Arnie Ziff is like kind of cut out of the movie, because I think it looks like Arnie's like, "Hello, Marge." But there's one thing, and this isn't even a criticism, but I wrote this down both times, or I noticed this both times. So just before the kid falls, and she sends Clark to get hot dogs, and she says, "I want orange juice." And they say freshly squeezed. But I swear to God, and this is not a looping thing, Clark sounds just like Kermit. He goes, "I know." He sounds just like Kermit.
That's so funny. You said that there were a few times in the Superman movies where Clark sounds exactly like Kermit the Frog. And it's I know, freshly squeezed.
Yeah, he sounds just like him. And it's because it's funny, because Christopher Reeve talked about this in one of the documentaries they made when they first came out on DVD in like 2001, I think. And he said, and you really see this, he stole a lot from Cary Grant when he's playing Clark. Like, Cary Grant in Bringing Out Baby is Clark Kent. He's even, because he wears glasses in that movie. Very handsome, but just bungling and with the glasses and stuff. And you really see, it's just such a smart choice. And just to, well, let me ask you this. This is something that my wife brought up that she didn't remember bringing up, and I don't know. This is not a lot. This isn't a Donner Lester thing. This is just the story of Superman 2, because Superman 2 is their love story. I mean, it begins in the first movie, but Superman 2, which is what I like about it, is very much focused on the love story between. I mean, it plays into the plot. It's you can't pull that out. We're talking about pulling Hackman out. You can't pull the love story out because it affects. It's integrated, I think, beautifully into the story. My wife said we were watching Superman 2 like years ago, and I guess she didn't quite buy the love story for this reason. And I don't have this issue, but I think it's an interesting idea. She says Lois just likes him because he's Superman. Like, who wouldn't like Superman? I think that's fair. I think Superman's 3 and 4 are obviously not better than 2, but they both do something really interesting. There's a woman in both those movies who likes Clark. Lana Lang likes Clark. Mariel Hemingway's character, I forget her name, likes Clark. In fact, there's a scene in Superman 4 that was such a great idea that they kind of fuck up, where he has a double date where he has to be Clark, and then and that could have been an incredibly great scene, It's a
Right.
great
So Mrs.
idea.
Doubtfire scene. Yeah.
But imagine how awesome that would be with like a guy
Yeah.
who can actually move space and time, and like that would be great, and it would be funny, and it would be like fuck, and it wouldn't be things blowing up. So I still think they should steal that idea for whatever the next Superman movie is, because that's just a great. That would be just fucking fantastic and fun, and it would be like a cool action sequence that doesn't have to do. But anyway, do you? So so she's interested in Superman because she's Superman, which I know probably goes back to the comic books. Do you have a problem? Their chemistry is great, but do you think it's just because Reeve and Kidder have such great chemistry from the first movie, or do you think I don't know? I always found an interesting thing. It's like, what woman wouldn't want to be with Superman? Like, really,
Well,
or even some men
it's
too, obviously.
I agree with your wife. I've always had a problem with the love story in Superman 2 because the second that they both get what they think they want, which is him to just be able to be with her, they both immediately regret it.
Mm,
And so that's sort of like Margot Kidder, or it's like Lois Lane saying, "Oh, I don't even like Kal-El. I just like Superman. I
mm,
just like the power." And so with Lois, she thinks she loves this person, but she just loves the power.
mm.
And when you take the power away from Superman and he's just a person, they immediately don't. It doesn't work for them. And I don't know what to make of that. I know it's just a convenience of the plot that had to be that way.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I like there's a comic called a Marvel comic line called what's it called, Unpowered or something, or Depowered, whatever it is. It's about superheroes who would they still be heroes if they didn't have their powers. And so it's like, would Spider-Man, if he never got bitten by a radioactive spider, would Peter Parker still be a hero in real life? It's a very cool kind of
That
like,
is
you
cool.
know, and so it's like, would Clark Kent, if he didn't have these powers, still want to be a hero in life and do good things in other ways?
Right.
They never explore that because they have to get his powers back to fight Zod.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't have I've never bumped on their love story. It's just that my wife made that comment, and I think it's interesting because I said to her, I'm like, "Oh, well, in Superman 3 and 4, there's a woman interested in Clark." Yeah, I mean, I understand why they do it in this movie, and I think their chemistry is really good. And I don't obviously the love story is I mean, there's so many even superhero movies where like, do you need this love interest? Is it just grafted on? It's not. Like they really built this out. It's just an interesting question that like um, you know, what woman or even man how could you not be attracted to Superman? I mean, he's like the best person ever, and he's hands. You know what I'm saying? It's just like interesting. I think it's
Well, it's
interesting.
also something that you can dive into more in a comic book or serialized TV show than you
Yeah,
can in a movie because
yeah,
the love story, the will they or won't they, is secondary to the action and to the threat.
right.
And so you're already bloated enough with Lex, the three villains,
Yeah,
everything else is him being depowered. That it's like if it was a TV show, if it was Lois and Clark, you could spend a few episodes on him not having his powers
sure.
without it feeling like one of the things that I don't love about the James Gunn movie is that you have Superman and then for about 25 minutes they stick him in a box,
Mm,
right? And he's not being Superman until he breaks out of the box.
right,
And so it's like, how are you going to have a Superman movie where half the movie is him not being Superman? You can't have Superman 2
right.
and spend 25 minutes with Kal-El.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's limitations of the medium, and I think you make a good point about the James Gunn movie, but I mean, it's not Superman, it's Superman 1.1. Like this is obviously going unless it made no money, which of course it did very well. Obviously, there's going to be a Superman. They won't call it
Oh, I
Superman
think Man
2.
of Tomorrow is going to be way better than Superman. I'm
Yeah,
very excited for it.
yeah. So I mean, I really enjoyed the new Superman movie, but you can easily see how a second one is it could be better. And it's interesting. You know, I've said that about other things where it didn't work out. I walked out of Wonder Woman and I was like, that was really good, but the second one's gonna be fucking amazing because they could just go
And it was
right to it.
terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
But they could have started. I mean, they had everything going for them. And I still like Gal Gadot in that role. I hope they don't nickel and dime her because it's not her fault.
It's not.
You
Look,
know,
hey, look, all credit where credit's due for all the problems that Marvel Studios had with Ed Norton when he came in and rewrote his Hulk film when he was the Hulk. They supercharged the origin story that whole origin story happens in the opening credit sequence
Mm.
when he becomes the Hulk and the gamma rays and everything.
It's like the
So
show.
that when the movie starts, it feels like a continuation of the Incredible Hulk TV show.
Right.
Rather than like an origin story. And I loved that about it because no one needs to see Bruce Wayne's parents get shot again, right? Like we've been there, we've done that. Let's just jump in. And that's one thing. I don't really love the Batman, but at least they didn't do that again.
Right. The Batman, which I like more than you did, it's like the second year. He's been Batman for a year,
Yeah.
and it's like, and I think it's a simple thing, but that's a good take because yeah, I was very afraid because my biggest problem with the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man was that like it had only been 10 years and we had to watch him become Spider-Man again. And it's what I'm terrified.
Yeah, well, and they really fucking messed it up too. They didn't do a very good job.
Right, but I'm terrified, absent any evidence, that they're gonna do that with James Bond. There's no evidence to go either way right now, but
It's in good hands. I think you're good.
I think it's good, but like they've only done James Bond's origin story once. They did it perfectly. I want him to be James Bond. He can be younger. He's gonna be a young man. That's fine. But I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him get his double O again. I want to kind of get to, if there's no Lex Luthor in this movie, there's something about this movie that I think actually would improve, and I bet you have a problem with this too. In both versions of this movie, Superman uses Lex Luthor to help trick Zod, to help do this sort of fake out that like he's going to be in the chamber, and I think that's very cool. I like that Superman wins by his wits, but there's one moment, and it's in both versions, where Reeve, bless his heart, plays it a little too broad. He's like, shh, shh, it's like he's playing just that one bit too broad, and that he knows that Lex is going to fuck him over. And if Lex isn't there, it might actually make that whole thing go better because Zod wouldn't know any of that. Like Zod, even though he's smart, he still doesn't know about the Fortress of Solitude. And that scene could work kind of the same way. So I'm just thinking about like if Gene Hackman's not in the movie, not that he's bad, giving us the room that we need. I think we could probably this isn't editorial. The cut I want to do of this movie, cutting him out wouldn't, we can't shoot more scenes. Although if you want to do your AI thing, actually, no, your AI thing wouldn't work because like, I don't think AI could do the emotions of these scenes that we want. Meaning,
well, you're talking about a rewrite though. You're not just talking about
exactly
shots.
But
yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is a writer's problem, but it's a solvable problem, right? Like the narrative purpose is reverse it so that they lose their powers and Superman doesn't.
Right.
That's where you have to get to. Mankiewicz is a pretty good writer. He could figure that out, right? If you get rid of Gene Hackman, you get rid of a lot of the camp and you keep the intensity of the three main bad guys without overloading it. And then it's not as noticeable. To me, it's in both versions. It's so noticeable how Luthor disappears for like 45 minutes, and then he shows up randomly in the White House with the white flag, and like 3 times Zod's like, "Okay, non, kill him," and he's like, "No, I've got more information."
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. I think, it might be by virtue of the fact that they paid him $2 million for 4 movies, so they'd be like, fuck that, we're not cutting him out of the second movie. And the studio's being like, look, yes, we know who Christopher Reeve is now, but we don't have Brando. We're not nickel and diming Hackman. That's an excuse. It's not a reason. I think.
Well, it's also was a formula that worked, so they're not going to fuck with that, right?
Right. You don't take it. Otis and Miss Tessmacher get the hook pretty early, but you want to have Lex. I guess it's a good example. It's an example in good and bad of too many villains. Batman Returns has Penguin and Catwoman,
but it also has Max Schreck too.
It also has
it's
Max
got a
Schreck.
third villain.
It's got a third villain.
But you see, and look, multiple antagonists are not the problem if they're connected in the proper way. Dark Knight has multiple villains, right? But Two-Face exists because of Joker, so it makes sense. X2 has multiple villains, but they're all tied into the same. Captain America: Winter Soldier is, I think, in the top 3 comic book films ever made. I think it's a great film, not just a superhero film. Right. And you've got Robert Redford as Secretary Pierce. He's a bad guy. You've got Winter Soldier. He's a bad guy. but they're both parts of Hydra, which connects them, and which works in a character way because Captain America is betrayed by his own nation essentially, and so like he like it destroys his feelings of loyalty to the country, which is he's Captain America for Christ's sakes, right? And so there's a purpose for the multiple villains, and they work. So
Mhm.
you can have multiple antagonists, but in this case, they just wanted to have Lex Luthor in there because this is pre Guardians of the Galaxy. This is pre Iron Man. This
All
is
of it.
pre
All of
B
it.
level characters being bad guys. You're not going to have a Batman movie without the Joker. You're not going to have a Superman movie without Lex Luthor. You're definitely not going to have Superman 2 without Lex Luthor because that's what made the first film so successful.
Yeah, and I think you've talked me into Lex not being in this movie at all because you really
Sorry,
don't need
Gene.
it. No, it's fine. I think you've talked me into it, and plus, you've got three villains. You've Zod, Ursa, and Nan. I mean, Nan is a henchman, but you already have. It isn't just one villain. It's like one main villain with two incredibly formidable sidekicks. So I agree, and that's not something we could fix. Donner versus Lester, and I think the reasons for it make sense. They're not outrageous. I mean, it's like, yeah, you're gonna have. Let me ask you this though. There's this book I read to my daughter when she was younger, and it's like basically takes you through all the DC villains by hero. So it takes you through all the Batman villains and the Superman villains and the Flash villains. And so the Batman villains, it's a very deep bench. You've got the Joker, the Penguin, Riddler, Catwoman, Two Face. That's five. I know there's more than five, but those are five villains that could each be in their own movie that could sustain their own. They haven't, but each of those could be in their own movie. The
Oh,
Joker's
you even have Clayface, which is going to have his own standalone movie.
fine.
Like that's
That's
the the,
six.
the
Okay,
term Rogues Gallery comes
from
from
Batman.
Batman.
So
Yeah.
Batman has an incredibly rich tapestry of villains, and they're villains like Batman himself. You could do it camp, you could do it serious. We've seen Cesar Romero, we've seen Heath Ledger, we've seen Nicholson, who's kind of right in between in terms of the tone of it. Superman, you've got Lex Luthor and Zod, who are great villains. I don't know if Ursa and Nan are from the comics, but it's a steep drop off. You've got Brainiac, Mr. Mxyzptlk, Bizarro, maybe one other. The Superman. I mean, this is my question for you. The Superman villains to me strike me, except for two cases, as being really fucking dumb. There's some that I just don't know because I don't read the comics. Like, what's the bench of Superman? Luthor is the Joker. Maybe Zod is a close second, at least the way, or at least Zod as we see him in this movie. Let's say you couldn't use just for Superman 2 or 3 of these new ones that's coming out. Who is the villain going to be? What's the bench of Superman in
It's
the
really it's really Brainiac, but it's a product of what Simon and Schuster did with Superman when they created him. The early Superman comics, Superman would see a problem in the world and go and fix it. And it's usually the same formula each time, where Superman would take it, just like in the James Gunn movie. He would take somebody who was doing something bad and then whisk them off somewhere and show them, like do the bad thing to them, and so that they could walk a mile in their victim's shoes. It was all social commentary. It wasn't villain of the week kind of stuff like with Batman. And so, or even like with what Stan Lee would do with, Fantastic Four, and how deep the bench is for bad guys in Marvel comics, way deeper. Like Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is just as interesting as Batman's. Superman was more an icon where it was more social commentary. And so because he's an alien, it was more cosmic and it was more campy and it was more Flash Gordon-y.
right? Interesting.
And that doesn't translate as well to, 70s trying to like you got to give Donner and Lester credit for taking these three flying leather clad British bad guys and making it make sense on Earth.
Right. Gotcha.
And that's something that like X-Men did really well. Another case of, really good group of villains. Even the B villains are interesting. Like Mystique and Toad are known villains now, but they weren't when X-Men came out. So, credit to Bryan Singer. But I think we'll see what James Gunn has in store, because you can't just keep having Lex Luthor in a mechanized suit fighting Superman every movie. You see it with Metamorpho. That's a good example. So Metamorpho is whatever the name of the actor is who was in Barry. What's his name? The guy who played Metamorpho.
Oh, no, how Hank.
Yes, yeah, NoHo Hank.
Corey, I forget his name.
Well, so that's a really interesting
Anthony
character because
Corrigan.
yeah,
Corrigan. Yeah.
he's a Superman villain who was created accidentally through like a science experiment gone wrong. But he's got like he was like a human, and now he's got like a can he like because of how he looks and what he is, can he still be a human? Can he still be with his wife? Like these are plot lines that are in the comic books that are pretty adult, pretty good, but he looks really funny and weird. But James Gunn made it work because he's already his cinematic language through Guardians of the Galaxy. You've got a talking tree and a talking raccoon. You're ready to accept this weird looking character as this complicated villain. So I think we're in a better place now to have more complicated, weird bad guys than we were in 1981.
Okay, I like that answer. Because just sticking with the Reeve movies, the third movie has basically a Lex Luthor clone because Richard Lester directs 3 totally on his own. I'm sure Hackman just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then Hackman comes back for 4 and has like this nuclear man. So I think you answered my question that I did have it right about but I think there's a way to do these cosmic villains better. And Zod can come back. We haven't seen Zod in this new universe yet, so maybe Zod will be the Joker. I don't know. I mean, so I want to.
Well, they're definitely doing Brainiac, and so Brainiac's going to be the big bad for the next couple movies.
That's good.
And you've got a really great bad guy coming up in Supergirl. You got Lobo being introduced in Supergirl. A lot of good stuff coming out with like the Green Lantern Corps. They're in good hands, I think.
Okay, good. That makes you feel better. Jumping around a little bit, we sort of alluded to this, but I really want to talk about Marlon Brando and what an asset he is to the Donner Cut. I think a huge engine behind people wanting to see the Donner Cut was to have Brando restored to it. And I think it makes a lot more sense. I didn't know he had a role in 2. I mean, I didn't know because he's in the beginning, and I didn't really remember his role in the first one because he does pop up in the first one, sort of like holographically. But I think looking at his performance in 1 and 2 together, not only does the paycheck make more sense, I'm more impressed with the performance because like we get to see the end of it. The way it is in the Lester cut, and they were forced into this decision as far as how he gets his powers back is absurd.
Yeah.
But to be a little fair, they couldn't use Marlon Brando, and they were in a corner. Maybe there was a more creative way to get out of that. I think.
Yeah, but of all the choices they could have made, they had like the weird claymation skull melting sequence. It's really weird.
Well, no, I'm talking about how he gets his powers back.
Oh, okay.
I like how he loses his powers. I think that's that always kind of freaked me out. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just talking about like him going back and finding the green crystal, which seems kind of random. I like the idea that he has to make this choice. It's like another choice of, do I have this right? Like, you'll never see me again. It just feels more thought out here, and it feels
well. Not only that, but he makes he makes this decision, speaking with his father, saying, "I don't, I've already given enough to humanity. I want to be able to be happy." And his father saying, "Okay, all right, this is your choice." And then when he's like, "I've made a mistake and I want my powers back," he's like, "Okay, well, the trade-off is that you never get to see me again." And that's his only connection to his home planet, to his history, it's his father. And he's like, "You'll never see me again." And he's like, "I'm going to choose humanity over everything else." And it's a nice mirror to him being selfish. You could say selfish maybe because, he wants to be with Lois, but that's a choice. We're talking about agency, right? Like he has to make this impossible choice to fight Zod.
Yeah.
And you don't get any of that in the Lester version.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of what his father was hoping in the beginning of that first movie of like, I want to send to Earth the best of who we are. And I think he does make that sacrifice, even if it's at his father's expense.
And it's just great seeing him and Brando at it in a scene together. I mean, it just is like watching them, and it's like, I know they didn't film it.
They didn't actually film it together. Yeah, but no, it works. I mean, it I really love the when he comes back, when Superman has and he's standing outside the, is he like, "Would you care to step outside?" I love this battle. I love the the effects work, the model work, all of it. I love the gags in terms of like how they're fighting. I think it's a really great sequence. I think that, you know, Lester adds some unnecessary comedy to it. Another thing he does that I don't like. So I guess I'm gonna credit Richard Donner with most of this. Lester adds the bit I talked about with the phone booth, and then just like all the stupid ADR. Like there's another thing that annoys me where there's a coworker standing next to Lois, and she's like, "The big one's just as big as Superman," and she's like laughing, and it's like, who is this fucking woman who's like razzing Lois about like, it's just so it's like this that woman.
You know what's weird about that sequence in both versions is like how unaffected everybody seems by this carnage taking place in the middle of Metropolis. They're kind of like, oh look, like they're just kind of watching as spectators, and no one's really freaking out, and that kind of bothered me.
Well, I'm of two minds about it because when I watched the Lester cut and the guy said, "Man, this is gonna be good," I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah,
Lester added that," but then it's in the Donner cut,
yeah,
and I think you're right on the one hand, but in the world of this movie, they already know who Superman is. It's like they live in a world that they've seen Superman fly around and pull boats and put him in the middle of like, Wall Street or whatever it is. So having three more people with Superman's powers coming is something that they could accept. So I don't bump on that in the way I think you are, because in their world, it's Superman 2, not Superman 1. They've had a couple weeks, months, whatever it's been, to accept that we now live in a world where people fly and shoot lasers out of their eyes and can blow buildings apart with their breath. So that doesn't bother me. One thing that bothers me in both cuts is like, they killed Superman. Let's get him. I'm like, are you fucking people out of your minds? Like, that kind of counteracts the point I just made. It's like, you've just watched Superman maybe not get killed, but get pounded into the ground. But that's just, I mean, whatever. That's a small thing. But
yeah. That and the woman pushing the baby carriage
which is in
and
both
being like,
cuts.
ah,
Yeah,
that's in both cuts.
that's more like in the Donner cut, at least that's more just like that's like a silly thing, but it's in the tone of like an old Superman thing, or like why is she walking her baby around at what feels like midnight and stuff. But I just love that whole battle. I love the gags. I love I mean, yeah, I think the special effects, obviously they're older, but I think they still work on their own terms. It's still like really
I love him.
convincing.
I love him. Launching him into the Coca-Cola sign. It
Yeah.
still looks
It
great.
looks
Yeah,
great. It looks
all
really,
the
really.
neon looks great.
Yeah, I think much because the funny thing about Metropolis, which boy, they don't make any. You see the Twin Towers, like Metropolis
Oh yeah,
is
they
New
destroy
York,
the Statue of Liberty, the
right?
torch of the Statue of Liberty in Metropolis.
It's interesting because like Metropolis is in New York, and the Donner movies make 3 and 4 also make. There's a whole scene on the top of the Statue of Liberty in the third movie. Make no make no attempt to make Metropolis not like New York, but it doesn't bother me. Whereas Gotham City, in almost every version of it, it's always sort of different, like it's even the two Tim Burton movies, they look different, which may be a detriment. Like Gotham City has to be like this dark, foreboding place. They have to pull from a lot of things, but Metropolis is really just New York. Like and I
Hmm.
think that works. I mean, it's a cleaner version of New York. You don't have like, even for you don't have like the actual crime that we would be seeing. But yeah, I just love this whole battle. I think it's so great. I think it's so inventive. And yeah, I've always loved it as a kid. And you know what I always think of though? This might be a weird poll. And I think this is just my little kid brain not knowing what was what. Remember the old HBO opening where it would pull out from like a city street and then it would fly over like and then it would go into so this is like in the early 80s. They did this whole thing when they're pulling through this model of a city. I always thought it was Metropolis, and it's sort of around the same time. So it's just this thing I always connect the old full. You can see this on YouTube, the old full HBO thing, or with Metropolis, and it's just the way they were building models and stuff back then. I think Derek Meddings, who did a lot of the model work on the old Bond movies, did the. I know we worked on the first one, and he probably worked on the second one. So it's just great model work.
Yeah,
Oh,
I like the the New York climax, the Metropolis climax, because it's populated.
Yeah, there's
And
people there. Yeah.
there's people there, and I compare it again to go back to the Ed Norton Hulk movie. At the end of that movie, he fights Abomination in New York in the streets, and it's a really great fight between Hulk and Abomination, but it doesn't feel populated. It feels like everybody's hiding inside. And in Superman, it's kind of like at the end of Spider-Man, where the citizens of New York are part of the climax. It feels like the citizens of Metropolis are part of the climax,
Yeah.
and that's really hard to pull off. And
Yeah.
and Donner pulls it off. You know.
A moment I like in both cuts, but again, I'm going to credit to Donner. Jumping back to the ending where he kisses Zod's hand and then he crunches it and Zod starts screaming. That is so awesome. That is
Yeah.
that is such a satisfying because Zod is such a formidable villain. He's so terrifying. And I think we already talked about how I think if Hackman's not there, I think they could have created the illusion a little bit better that like Superman was, losing. Maybe. I mean, in the end, he's going to win, but I think they could have done a slightly better job of making that moment better as far as like, oh, he gave his powers up, but it's so satisfying.
It used to bother me how Non
Tries
just
to
kind of
fly.
jumps into the void,
Yeah.
but now I fucking love it.
Yeah. And I love Lois punching Ursa, which again could have been such a groaning kind of like trying to get people to applaud in a theater moment, but it feels so earned because we spent so much time. So I want to get to something now that and I already know what your counter is going to be. So hear me out because I have a little editing that I want to do that you can do with the cut. So I think there's a scene from the Lester movie, and it has to be him because I know it was shot for Superman 2 because Margot Kidder looks like, she just looks different. I think the scene, so the movie's, it's all wrapped up, and the scene that she has with Clark in the Daily Planet, where she's very emotional about having to let him go, is absolutely outstanding. I think it's the best acting in any superhero movie ever. Credit to both of them, but it's largely Margot Kidder. I mean, Reeve is definitely doing his part. I think, and I know how she was very unhappy during this movie and didn't like Richard Lester, but I think she comes with the fucking thunder in this scene, and I think it's the most real that I felt this world that's definitely fanciful since like maybe the opening of the first movie, like when Brando's putting his baby in, which is also a great scene, but still kind of fantastic. And I just think, um, when she says like, I am selfish and I'm jealous of the whole world. And like, I understand why I have to let you go. And I think that scene is just incredible. And this is something we have to credit Richard Lester for. And it's bizarre because his contributions to this movie are so broad and so undercut are just not good. Like a lot of the humor that he and then the things that he reshot, I think are almost for the worst. And it's bizarre that this scene is as effective as it is. And I think if this scene were in the Donner cut, it'd be so much better. Now, I know you don't like, and I don't either, that he kisses her and makes her forget because it's this power we didn't know he had. I still think he could just decide at that moment to run the world back and make her forget. And then you could go right back into that scene, which again, we talk about how we see we see Superman go from Kal-El to Clark to Superman. I think she's equally impressive where she forgets and then she turns back into Lois and it's totally believable. And she's like, what's going on in the world? So I think editorially, you can keep the scene that I love and keep him winding the world back, which you don't have a problem with that being a run back of the first movie. I mean, we can't fix that. They took the ending of 2 and ended 1 with it. We're kind of stuck with it. But I think it makes more sense. But I guess in the ending of 1, she wouldn't have died. He wouldn't have had to run the world back because the way 1 ends is just him taking the rocket, throwing it in space, and then the movie would end with him going free. So I guess we're not even in that. So I don't know. I guess my question for you is, what do you think of that scene just unto itself? Am I fixed to it?
Well, I actually would prefer the magic kiss
Really?
to Yeah, and here's why.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought you were would be against that.
You know my issue with the Italian Job. It's the same problem. And so you have this whole movie and you have all this adversity, and then Superman turns back time, not even rooted in the same emotional way as the first movie, where it's like that
She's dead. Yeah.
the best shot of the movie where
Yeah.
and he
Amazing.
flies out.
Yeah.
This is like we don't even see him start his flight in Superman 2. It's just all of a sudden a montage of her typing and Perry with the toothpaste, and he's
Because
just like he's smiling and flying around the earth backwards, and time it's not motivated by any sort of emotion.
mhm,
And the problem with that is it undoes everything that happened. Zod and everybody's back in the Phantom Zone.
right.
They can get freed again. But not only that, but he goes back to the middle-aged trucker and beats him up, and no one knows who the fuck this guy
I
is.
had that same issue. So it's okay. So let's go to that part first. So so okay. Just let's go to the middle of the trucker thing. I didn't think of that until this viewing because I watched both these cuts a day apart, which I've never done before, and I highly recommend that because it's a really great film study, regardless of which way you come down on this. It's really fascinating to see. I mean, if you could stomach doing it in the same day, that would be interesting. But I did it, 12 o'clock one day, 12 o'clock the next day, and I never connected to the point. I never connected to what you just said until a couple days ago. It's like, oh, wait a minute, he's now beating up a guy who doesn't know who he is, and he's getting revenge on somebody who didn't wrong him, but he also knows this guy's a fucking bully.
Yeah, but it's also not really consistent because then he looks at the waitress. He's like, I've been lifting weights, and so it's like
She doesn't know who he
so some
is.
people remember, some people
No, no,
don't.
no, you're
But
right.
either way, he's petty and a bully, right?
No,
He's not Superman at that moment.
it's completely petty and out of character, but it's very satisfying as a
Oh,
viewer.
it's so satisfying,
But you're
but
right,
it's
the
not what
waitress
the
wouldn't
movie
know who he
needed.
is because she's looking at him and it's like, "Oh, I've been lifting." You're right. It doesn't make sense in the Donner cut to put that scene in if you're gonna have him run the world back. If you keep him having the magic kiss, then you can keep it because
Yeah, if you
everybody.
keep the magic kiss, and look, you're talking about a movie where a guy flies around and, like three super beings are trapped in, a sheet of glass.
Right.
Like, Lester did too much outside the box stuff in the final fight with like all of a sudden they can like transport to different places, and he throws
Yeah.
the cellophane S from his chest, and
Yeah.
right, like none of that is set up, so it doesn't make sense. You can write, just like we were talking how you can figure out a way
Mm.
to get, to fix the ending to where he tricks them into being outside when they think he's inside. You can figure out how to set up a magic kiss earlier in the movie,
Right. So maybe it's a
and the
screenplay.
magic kiss solves all the problems I have with the end of the Donner cut.
Okay, so you're saying keep the magic kiss,
But
but
set it up. That's
something
all.
has to be written to set it up, like not AI. Something would have had. So I guess it might
Yeah.
just be a flaw with that Mankiewicz script that they just weren't. Meaning if Donner had been able to do the entire thing. Okay, so you talked me into the magic kiss thing. Another thing that you as far as when they're flipping around and he says like, "Oh, I used to play this when I was a kid at school." It's like, "No, you didn't. You didn't know any other kids who had your powers. You weren't a kid on Krypton." Sorry, Krypton. Actually, more like you weren't a kid on
That's how,
Krypton.
yeah, how Brando says it. Krypton.
You weren't a kid on Krypton, so you didn't play this when you were in school. Who'd you play it with? Your uncle, mom, pa, Kent. That just seemed like a joke that they wanted to put in without thinking about it. But yeah, you're right. If we do the magic kiss, then him kicking the guy's ass at the end, at least the guy knows who he is, and he could do as I've been lifting weights joke, which you're right makes no sense if this
And
woman's never.
it's still petty and it's still against character,
Yeah,
but I think it humanizes him because I'd want to kick that guy's ass too.
I think it's him being more human. I think you can actually talk him because he's becoming more human and he was humiliated and you
Yeah.
never see that. Like he doesn't feel that way about Zod because Zod's just the fucking villain. But I think it's a little bit of Lois. Like that's what Lois
Well,
would
and you know
do.
what? It's a sliding doors moment there too, because let's say that they did what we wanted and set up a magic kiss and had a magic kiss, and he had this moment of humanity where he's more human than he is alien. All of a sudden, Superman 3 becomes a lot more interesting,
Mm,
because if they're exploring that theme of what am I? Am I a human? Am I an alien? Where's my loyalty? Where's my allegiance? Then maybe we get more Kal-El, right? Then maybe we get more of that kind of stuff. And we don't have Richard Pryor. It would have just been a different. Who knows what that would have looked like? But
Yeah,
it does set up an interesting
yeah. I don't know what the
future for the franchise.
I don't know what the future of the franchise was, other than that Tom Mankiewicz had said in one of the commentary tracks that he that either Donner was going to direct 3 and Mankiewicz was going to direct 4. They didn't have it mapped out, but they were in it for the long haul. They were thinking about 3 and 4 at least a little bit, and they obviously didn't get that far. I mean, they had to abandon 2 for just financial reasons. You know, they just couldn't finish it. But yeah, I do wonder because yeah, 3 and 4. I mean, 3 and 4 are just different, but Donner's completely gone. Mankiewicz is completely gone. John Williams is completely gone. You know, the Salkinds aren't even involved with the 4th one. So 3 and 4 are, and the Metropolis just looks so different in those 2 movies because they shot them in different places. It's just not, you know, it's only a couple years later, but it's just not the same creative team. I mean, Superman's a really interesting franchise. It's like as you lose piece by piece certain creatives, what happens? You know, like
Yeah, and then when you waste 10 years with Zack Snyder, like we're kind of like in PTSD mode and hoping that James Gunn has a real plan.
mhm.
But much like watching what they did with the Marvel first few phases of the Marvel movies, they didn't start any of this stuff until James Gunn knew where he wanted to take it.
Right.
So I know we have at least 10 years worth of DC movies that are thought out and
Yeah, I
planned
mean,
for.
and they put somebody in charge who's directed some Marvel movies, who's a creative, regardless of what you think of James Gunn. But they put someone in charge who has been on the battlefield and obviously likes superhero comics, and you know, so I'm very enthusiastic about where these are going to go. Um, because I think they're less interested in they're letting Marvel be Marvel and they're doing their own thing. And I think that's the thing. Because even that first Wonder Woman movie, is amazing as much as like DC was chasing Marvel, they still had the first female, I mean, not ever, of course, but they still beat them in the space race of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we got the first, and it's Wonder Woman, a character everybody knows, a character that has never been done right, never had a good movie, or I don't think she ever had a movie, period. There were so many Wonder Woman movies. Like there was a Joss Whedon one, there was a pilot that never went. I mean, Wonder Woman, we were growing up, it was Linda Carter, the TV show, and like Christopher Reeve, she looked exactly like Wonder Woman. Like
Yeah.
and even the guys who were drawing the comics back then were saying like, yes, this is what she would look like if she were a human being. I mean, that show's very campy, but yeah, they just kind of squandered what Wonder Woman could be, but they still won that race. That was a big deal. That was one of the few times where DC was like, okay, give it up. They
Yep.
did it mostly right, and it's a character everybody knows. And I remember going to see my daughter was too young to go. She was like 1, but I remember going to see it with my wife, and there were like little girls dressed as Wonder Woman. It was almost like Barbie before Barbie. I mean, it wasn't that
Mm-hmm.
big, but it was a similar thing. When I went and saw Barbie, there were like people dressed in pink, and it just felt like very like, like woman forward, and Wonder Woman. It was a really exciting moment, and I still think, I really hope James Gunn doesn't shit can Gal Gadot and they just make a 3rd movie and put her in it. And what I don't know what the fuck it is. I know nothing about that lore, but I think like Christopher Reeve and like Chris Hemsworth, that's such a hard part. It's such a hard part not to look stupid, and I think she's so great. So Matt, where can people find you if they want to find you?
So I've actually got my YouTube channel up, Fade In Screenplays. So at fade.in.screenplays. And I do breakdowns of script structure and, screenwriting tips and that kind of stuff. So that's where you can find me these days, unless you get in trouble in Baltimore.
I would choose option A if I were you, listeners. Dear listeners, you can find me on Instagram and Letterbox, both Edward Clow. You can find me on Vimeo, where I've done some short films. If you have any questions, you can email me at hindsightingquestions@gmail.com. Matt, that was a really great chat. This was a really tricky episode to do because we were doing something that I didn't know how to attack it, but I think the way we attacked it was good. And I really can't think of another circumstance where we're going to be talking about 2 movies interchangeably like this. So, you're the world's biggest Superman fan that I know, or one of certainly up there. So I can't think of anybody else I want to talk to you about this. And people really, if you haven't seen either one of these movies, I recommend watching them both and watching them both kind of close together so that you can really see what's different, what's alike. I think this is we've been critical of a lot of stuff, but I think we could both agree it's pretty incredible that we got to see not the movie that Donner wanted to make, but at least how it was conceived, which is how he put it, you know?
So final takeaway, Ed, which do you like better?
I like the Donner cut better, but through gritted teeth would say goodbye to the Paris scene unless I could find another place for it. I think the Donner cut is better. I think it's choppy, and I think the special effects aren't quite up to snuff because they don't match. There's like new special effects on top of an old movie doesn't look right. It's kind of like the special editions. I think AI could fix that, and I'd be okay with AI as far as fixing the Donner cut. You know, simulating the voices of Reeve and Hackman and Kidder or all of them. That Terrence Stamp's dead now too, and so I would put the end of the scene with Lois in, at the end of Lester's. I think that scene's incredibly well acted. I think Margot Kidder just does incredible work in that. And again, Reeve too. And so, I mean, it's really like 90% Donner cut, but just
Yeah, I'd say Donner cut,
and the
Donner
scene,
cut plus Magic Kiss.
Magic Kiss, and the scene where he reveals himself, where he sticks his hand in the fire on purpose, because that just makes more sense for the character. I think the not even because it's a screen test. I just think that the gun thing, it's clever and it's like in the spirit of Superman, and I like it into itself. But Superman, it's just like him getting tricked into making this important decision, and I think this movie works because it's him deciding to reveal himself, deciding to give up his power, and deciding to take them back. And it's Lois deciding she can let him go. And I just think, I know I'm going on and on about it, but I feel people are a little cruel to Margot Kidder because of the obvious mental and substance problems that she had. I just think she just does such incredible emotion. She just makes me believe this relationship in a way that I don't know that we're ever going to see that again. So this is really a one of one. And look, if anybody wants to sort of write me and say, no, you forgot about this, I may slap my forehead 10 minutes after we stop recording and be like, oh, I can think of it. But this is
like, I wonder if there were two versions of American History X. Wasn't that mostly reshot?
It wasn't reshot. Norton took over the cutting of it, but that's different. That's purely editorial. This is different versions of scenes and scenes reshot and
Solo. I guess Solo. If there was a version of Solo out there before they
Lord and Miller,
Ron Howard,
yeah. I think they were fired pretty early into it, and I don't think Ron Howard shot. Yeah, I did think about Solo, but I don't think they got far enough into it to have their own version.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think this is a unicorn.
I think this is a real unicorn, and I think even if you don't give a fuck about Superman, which I could certainly understand, I think just looking at, I mean, the only thing I think of this pops in my head is The Exorcist 4. Rennie Harlan redid Schrader's. I don't know the facts, but I remember they released both of them. That's the only thing that pops in my mind. I've never seen either one. I don't know if you have, but Paul Schrader did The Exorcist 4. It wasn't called that. It was like an Exorcist prequel. He gets fired. Rennie Harlan takes over. That's the only, and they ended up releasing both though. So they didn't cleanse the other one. I've never seen it. I think when those came out, the revelation was not how different they were, but how the same. That's the only thing I could think of. I don't know the circumstances, but I know that there's a Schrader version and a Rennie Harlan version, and that's the only thing.
Yeah, no, I think Superman 2 is its own thing, but I would recommend watching them in order though, Lester then Donner.
Absolutely,
you've got to see the Lester one before you watch this.
110%. It would not because you have to see what was done and what was improved. And yeah, going the other way, I think it would be a negative experience. You would just be like, yeah. I think the virtues of the 2 or 3 virtues of the Lester one might not be in that sharp relief if you watch it after. But yeah, I would. Yeah. All right, that's our show. Next episode, Jordan Roeder and I discuss another 1981er, Arthur. Till then, looking forward to looking back.